The Thinking Tackle Podcast.
It stops bothering you, and you just crack on, you know. But yeah, when you know, when I'm fishing, if somebody's caught one, I'll go around. I love to do the pictures and what have you, but you know, I certainly won't pump them for any information.
Yeah,
I want to work it out myself.
Yeah, it's at that stage, right? I'll let you get your rods back out now. Do you know what I mean?
It's a weapon to be able to not be too social, isn't it? Though as well.
Yeah.
To be able to just,
I think it's
be able to
necessary.
just mind your own business.
I consciously go on to lakes to be polite and everything, and that, but just not be walking into people's swims. And
people are not expecting it from you either, I guess.
Exactly. Otherwise, you make your rod for your back, don't you? If you're not careful, and it's good to have a certain amount of etiquette and. Yeah.
Darryl said it when he fished Bayswater. He said it just murder. He put on about a stone where it was takeaway every night. All his mates were down there, all drinking tea in his swim constantly. You know, and he said he could come out the end of it fatter, having not really caught a lot. You know, drunk loads of lager. You know, and didn't really enjoy it. You know, I'm sure he enjoyed the evenings when they happened.
One or two, you know, every now and again. I couldn't do it every week like that. You know, I just want my
your
own
bit in your podcast. I liked about when you talk about going to the calf. You know, we used to do that. We used to go to the calf.
We do
you
that.
know, just two or three of you
more time
go to the calf, and that was something to really be looked forward to. You know, but I haven't had that. You know, I haven't had that for a long, long time.
Even the pub. I took a mate to the pub. I made him go to the pub this year. He caught the big one out the lake we were fishing. And I sort of made him, like, we're going down the pub now, and we drove down, and he had a couple of 3 pints, and that was a great afternoon. We remember that capture more we went and had a few pints, come back, had a barbecue in the evening. That was a memory you'll always remember because of that, I think.
It's good that you can turn it on though as well, isn't it? You can be ultra serious and quite keep yourself to yourself, but be able to do that as well.
It can go both ways, but on the whole,
you know, to be over obsessive and not want to leave the lake and. Our place is it's the opposite to that. If you're not social, you're not getting on.
I think. Do you not think Surrey's a bit more like when I mean a club? I don't mean an angling club, but almost like an old boys club. I don't mean they're all old, but you know it's it.
Yeah.
Well, they're getting older. If you're fishing in one down, it's like, oh, for fuck's sake, I've got to walk past 6 anglers at least. I ain't getting around there for hours. Literally, there's no way. You just can't. You have to talk to everybody.
I'd turn up in the dark then.
I was going to say, that's tricky if you're trying to find fish.
That is what I would do. I mean, what does Damo do? He's like the most antisocial bloke. I've fished with him in matches and thought I was on my own. One of the competitions we fished at Sandhurst, and I got a text through on my phone. The Yateley tackle inspectors are doing rounds. Your buzz bars are uneven. Best you sort them out from just a random number. You know, and it's Damien got in touch with somebody to like send a thing rather than saying to me, Dan, sort your bank sticks out. He's like text someone who then texts me, who he knows I don't know, to rip the crap out of me over my setup. You know, it just
does your head in. He's a lot more social on that on the lake, and he has to come down the calf and stuff like that. He just can't get away with it. It doesn't matter who you are.
Right.
It's like, you're coming down the calf.
So he's a little bit social, is he?
He's social. Yeah. Especially when a turtle's
even on the Korda trips, he'd just sit in his swim the entire week. Won't make a sound at dinner, nothing. Smiles a bit when someone's playing the fool, do you know what I mean? And then boom, he's back.
I've had those silences with him loads of times. So I'd be sat in the swim with him, talking. The amount of times I've been chatting away, right? Look round and he's just asleep.
I'm glad that affects on people though, Simon, don't you? You do.
I just want to say I'm glad he's the same with me as he is with you guys. That makes me feel better.
Yeah, no, it's just his way, isn't it? He's a smooth operator.
Yes, but he can adapt to the environment that he's fishing in as well. Yeah. Anyway, guys, we're live. Welcome to the show, Aaron Copp, Luke Stevenson, and Danny Fairbrass. Welcome to the podcast. We're going to do something a little bit different on this show, aren't we?
We are, yeah, absolutely. It's my idea. Having basically listened to both of your podcasts and absolutely loved them, and I'm not just saying it because you're in the room, as an angler of a lot of years on the bank now, when you listen to someone that you have looked up to and been inspired by, and then that person starts giving away a bit of how they do it, I was hanging on every word. I listened to both of yours twice almost off the bat, do you know what I mean? Because like Aaron, you were like down at Walthamstow. It's like that geese is down there. He's had 3 at the Lockwood. And it's like, no way, he hasn't, honestly, he has his, like that. And I'm fishing number one, trying to get half dozen bites in the day up against the islands, you know what I mean? So, and knowing about the other places that you fished and stuff, it was like, these were the guys that were just like myths. I wouldn't dream of going up and like, if you'd caught one, if I was there and I wouldn't dream of going anywhere near. Do you know what I mean? Where your swim, and then the same with Luke. That like catching a lot of the fish that I want to catch, and fishing them sort of lakes that I personally thought were a bit beyond me, and then hearing you talk about them, I was thinking, do you know what? He's only a bloke. Do you know what I mean? If he can do it, I can do it. And but the thing I got from both podcasts, and this is something I say to you, Simon, a lot. I want to know more. I want more detail. I want to know not just the story of the capture, but I want to know how and why and all that sort of thing. And I just thought, that back in the day, you two, if I put myself as a normal angler, you two guys, what you cast out and caught your fish on would be utterly secret. Do you know what I mean? There'd be no way that I would ever have an opportunity to ask you about what you did. And obviously now, later in your angling careers or angling journey, whatever you want to call it, I think we're all a bit more open now than we used to be, aren't we? So for me, it's a great opportunity for me. I want to ask you about how you do it and why you do it. And I've got some of my technology here as well. And I thought we'd just chew the fat over it and see where it goes. Basically.
Yeah, there's no shortage of rigs here. Before we get started, Dan, sorry, I've got a book there for you.
Have you written a book, Simon?
No, not yet, not yet. Well, we're going to both write a book.
You've only been doing a podcast about 6 months.
Podcasts. From Adrian Smith, and he's written
I heard that this had been
from
Iron Maiden in for me. Yeah, awesome. I mean, I'm not a rocker, but I'm very, very honoured to get this. Very honoured, and I will read that with very,
it's
very
good.
keen
it's good.
interest.
There's some.
He signed it as well. Bless him.
Yeah, he signed it. There's some.
Adrian, thank you very much if you're listening. I'm honoured. I'm honoured to have this. And once I've read the book I've just started to read, I'll read this one.
Good stuff. Right. Gifts, guys. Got any gifts?
You said a couple of old boilies.
No gifts. Anyone?
I've got a gift.
Oh.
I've got a proper gift as well. This is something I've been looking. Basically, I'm filming next week in Germany, and 5 years ago we got German licenses arranged, because you have to in Germany, right? A German angler has to pass a test in order to be allowed to go fishing, like a proper go to a municipality. And part of that test is how to gut and clean and fillet a fish.
What?
Right.
Practical test.
Yeah.
They're all sitting there in a room, all doing it, and that's how they get their German.
Aren't there some issues in some of the states where you're not supposed to return them? I don't know if that's
everywhere you're not allowed to return them.
Right, well.
Everywhere, and the only way they get around it is either not saying anything about it at all, or treating them as parent fish. The big ones are parent fish, and if there's no parent fish, they can't.
Yeah,
give
which
birth
is an
to the
element
little
of truth
fish.
to as well.
There is an
it?
element of truth to that, definitely. And when they stock them, they stock lots and lots of little carp, and that classic Dinkumbula strain with no scales on it that grows quick, and they do it for the table. And obviously some of them get through and they get massive, and they're mega fish. Cool, every time we go to Germany, I'm just like, oh my god, we're going to Germany. Do you know what I mean? And our team are so secretive about it. They won't tell me. I'm employing them. I'm paying their wages, and they will not tell me where they're fishing. Do you know what I mean? It's like that, And they really, honestly, they're really, really cagey about it. And so yeah, basically, I'm looking around for this fishing license and getting some old rigs to put up, because obviously not all of this on the table I use now. And I found this. which I'd kept for a special occasion, kept for
Right.
something. This is the rig box from underwater when I caught the big plated at St John's, and opening it up, I've actually got the rig
Have
in
you?
there that I caught the big plated on.
Brilliant. Which one was it?
Wow.
It was this one, the size.
Yeah,
6.
we all remember that, don't we?
It's on a pop-up, wasn't it? Was it
Yeah.
flicking over?
No, it was on a pink wafter.
What?
Okay.
So I'd noticed that fish was eating boilies. We'd put particle in the swim, and you can see I've got corn rigs and stuff there. And that basically, when it's set right, the hook sits flat on the bottom, and the bait just hovers above. They're homemade squid, dusky pink wafters, part bottom bait mix, part pop-up mix. And that is the one, because I remember it was sharpened. I'd learned to sharpen hooks off of Darryl Peck, and that was fished in conjunction with a cog lead, and that is actually the one that I caught
Was
the
it?
fish on,
That's amazing.
which is pretty cool, isn't it?
I
I'm not a nostalgic person,
No, but
that's pretty cool.
I always remember your reaction when you caught that fish as well, when it was in the net and then there was that delay and then there was like, yes, again. It's just like...
I just, for that to be the first bite as well, and,
Yeah.
you know, you've been there, all that preparation, which was months of preparation, and sitting there for a week and not having a single fish in front of the camera, and then the weather changed a tiny bit, the water temperature went up 0.5 degree, so it just turned up in the bay. And then we had a couple of frustrating days of them picking rigs up and getting away with them, and then that I noticed that the big plated was eating 2 boilies on a go. Like, we'd put out, the mainline did a bait back then that was like a very light sort of grey colour. I can't remember what it was called. Do you remember?
No, not maybe the Grange, or was that before?
No, it wasn't the Grange.
Right.
So the Grange is where it started, and then Activate come out and all of that. But there was I don't know if it had a fruity sort of note to it, but it was a sort of greyish colour. And we were using that and Cell mixed together. And I noticed, I watched the big plated come in, and obviously we're all like that because it's the big plated. And I watched it eat 2 boilies at once, and I had a bit of, I don't know if I've got a bit pink. I have got pink plastic. Here we go. I've actually got it in there. Wow.
So all these rigs were used on the...
all these rigs, I kept everything in one tackle box and didn't use the tackle box ever again after it.
It's amazing.
That's it. So I had a bit of pink plastic out there, that little combi rig,
I remember that.
and that went in a fish's mouth, and it blew it out before it even tightened up to the lead. And definitely pink over yellow, or pink over a mixture. Definitely, they really liked that colour.
That was the
at
biggest
that
thing you
time.
took away from that underwater, would you say, with the colour?
No, I think the biggest thing is about the length of the hook link.
Right.
And that's why I'm like looking down at Luke's, like I'd get 3 rigs out.
Yeah, you wanna look at this
And
one.
that's why I want to talk to these guys, because what they do is so different from what I do. But if you can hook a fish as it sucks the bait in, because I've never seen anything that the fish have not been able to suck back out, blow back out again. So we used like 3-4 inch, when we fished at Welly, 3-4 inch mono hook links, like IQ hook links, stiff, because obviously they're so short, a size 8 or 10 long shank hook, really sharp, with a big D on the back of it, and that disappeared completely inside its mouth and came completely back out again. It hadn't moved, it hadn't tightened to the lead, nothing. It had all gone in, and we're just waiting for it all to erupt, back out again.
Was this a tightly baited area?
They're always a tightly baited area
Because
you're in front of the cameras, and that's another thing with the underwater film. You get transfixed and obsessed on about the size of this table. Actually, that's what it is. And if the rig lands in the middle of the table, you don't have to move the camera at all. If it lands a tiny bit short, because as you've letting the lead drop, you pulled the rod back a tiny bit, or it's bounced back a little bit, then you pan the camera around and end up with the rig in the middle of the shot. And if it goes slightly long because you've put the rod slightly towards it, all that makes 2 or 3 foot difference. Then you pan around the other way. But we got obsessed with that, and that was one of the things. Me and Ali were the same. Tom was the natural angler on them projects. When we went to St John's, Tom was the natural angler, and he just got boilies, and he was a boilie angler at that time as well. he just threw boilies all down that
Spread it out.
margin,
Yeah.
all up and down it, and the water changed colour. They were eating boilies everywhere. Everywhere they swam, they were eating boilies, and the water changed colour, and it murked up a bit, and he just had them going. He had them feeding, whereas me and Ali were transfixed on this spot, and it wasn't the way.
Yes.
It really wasn't. You know,
Makes it easy for him, I think, doesn't it?
it definitely makes it easy for them and makes them spooky of that one bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I to answer your thing, yes, it was a reasonably tight baited area generally.
Because ideally you want them moving, don't you? Because my way of fishing is that, I'm believing I'm hooking and when I get movement, not when it's like being sucked in.
Yeah.
'Cause as
But do you honestly think they're going down to that boilie and picking that boilie up, and they've already clocked that one over there, and they're going to that one without any concern?
I think it's very natural, like because they're initially no hands, everything's got to go in the mouth to decide whether it's edible.
But I mean that moving thing, because that gets talked about a lot. I've got a spread of boilies. They're moving a long way between baits, so he's eaten that one and he's already on the way to something else. And I've never seen that. I've never seen that on the underwater.
But I'm talking. I'm definitely not envisaged. I'm hooking him because he's about to move. 2 yards away. I'm talking about if you're fishing for a sizable carp that he's taking it, and just even if he's upended in just a slight movement of he's sucked it in, and just that. And if I'm being able to fish a short enough hook length, that might be enough to whack. He's hooked.
But what I noticed from the underwater is having that hook link exactly the right length for that spot on that day with that baiting situation. That it's only sort of relevant to that moment. And I applied what I'd learned to everywhere, and it didn't work everywhere.
I think that's key, isn't it? The baiting situation.
Everything. The temperature had gone up half a degree that day, and they were starting to have it. The sun came out a little bit, and they started to have it. And suddenly they were.
The difference they were
really
reacting to
catchable.
boilies and particle differently as well.
So, some fish, we noticed when we put pure corn in, we had got a lot more small fish come in the swim, and different fish as well. But certainly none of the big uns. The big uns were eating boilies, and I know it's a cliche and everything, and we all talk about it. But really, they were. The big uns were coming in more when there was boilie there to be eaten, when we did fish, we fished with pure corn because we'd caught quite a few fish, so we could experiment. And with some days we did fish with pure corn, and actually I caught on rigs, probably a rig similar to that, with a pink boilie over corn. And when we had a little common coming, right, he was only about £15 when we landed him. He came in and he just sat there for ages, like looking at this bed of corn, just like looking at the whole lot like that. And then he like clocked the pink thing, and he just slowly went towards it like that. And we're like, he's going to eat. Bearing in mind, he's not eating a grain of corn, nothing. We just thrown it in, and he'd come in half hour later, and he'd not eaten any of the corn, but he's just like he was in the tractor beam with this pink hook bait, and he just went in and sucked it up and hooked himself. And boom, we were in, and it had been like 2 days of nothing had gone on. The weather had got cold again, and we put the corn out almost out of desperation. And then we caught the fish on that pink.
Did you catch many of those fish where they were? Because I remember what stands out for me were a lot of those fish seemed to get caught where they were just coming straight in as well. They were coming straight in and getting.
That started to happen more when we had the goo on. So I was there to be convinced about it because I really wasn't. And Ali there was corn twist, and it was so cold it was all congealing, and all the sugar was coming out of it and all that. And Ali put it on a load of sweet corn and threw it in, thinking like suddenly it was going to go like that. Nothing happened, and me and Tom were like, "See, it ain't no good. It ain't." We really, honestly, even though we were going to be selling it, we were really waiting to be convinced about it, and then. All the way through, Ali's talking about in your ear the whole time when you're fishing. Put this on. I'm like, Al, when it's your turn, you can put whatever you want on, mate. But at the moment, it's my turn, And but it went through to Tom's turn, and he had a pink hook bait on as a starting gambit, but a different one, not one of mine. I think it was a NutraBaits one, pink like pepper. Did they do a pink? Black pepper.
Yeah, they've done a black pepper.
Right. He had that on top of a bottom bait. Nothing. No reaction. And I'm sitting there thinking, my hook baits are the bollocks. That's why it's not just it's pink. It's all that love I've put into it, and that combination of flavours, and Lockie's squid and embutyric acid, and there was something else in it as well. You know, this is all sort of Frank Warwick sort of influence, and I'm properly like proud of myself that it's my hook baits that are doing it, not pink. You know, and then Ali eventually got him to put on like a pop-up, dumbbell pop-up that was soaked in the Tutti Frutti one. Put it out, nothing. And I'm like, my hook baits are better than the fucking goo. I'm the bollocks, right? And then we put the almond one on, and that just utterly changed it. They were hitting it like a lure. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. Just coming down and just like really aggressively. And Tom's rigs were shit, and he wasn't hooking anything.
What rigs what was Debbie using it?
I think he was using N-Trap soft, about 10 inches long, with a tiny little break by the hook, and like a size 8 curve. I think sort of like what was that rig where the hair came off the sort of you did the
was it the KD
rig? That's it. So you did your knot the snot, and then you pulled a bit out of the way and carried on doing the turn. So the hair was coming out, a funny thing, and he'd had 3 or 4 with it gone in its mouth and like nothing. And I'm like, Tom, you're just rubbish, mate. Your rig's a poop. Like, put one of mine on. He's like, no, I've got to sort it out. And he did. In the end, he did. He put a bigger hook on, shortened the hook length down, and he started catching them. But that, you know, that putting the goo on, that almond was like a revelation.
Yeah, and changing to a bigger hook as well, Dan. I mean, is that something that I've noticed that you've been using bigger hooks recently as well.
I have for ages. Big hook, small bait. I think it just fucks them up, doesn't it? If you can get them to take it in the first place, that's the thing, isn't it?
What about you, Aaron? Do you think the same thing with bigger hooks? Normally?
Back in the day, I used to be the complete reverse, and I'd be even scaling it down to like size 10s, you know, very light hook lengths, and the kind of the train of thought of match fishing, like, you know, because you kind of, you know, I've never did match fishing to a high level or anything like that, but you know, you kind of knew you should find the tackle down if you weren't getting bites. So I kind of carried that on with carp fishing, and there's always so many contradictions when we talk about anything like this, because on one hand there is something to that, on the whole idea that, you know, if I was using like a very light mono hook length and a little hook and a long hair, and that carp comes down, especially like if I was single hook bait fishing it, you know, she might come down, take it, and not realise anything's wrong, and then start to go away because you're using such a little hook and hook it. But
do you not think that even a small hook, that they can feel this sharp bit of metal in their mouth?
I don't. When I remember talking to you about this, Simon, I don't think it's that feeling the sharp bit. I think they can detect it's a foreign object and it's not edible. And what makes me say that was that thing I was telling you about, you know, the plastic corn, when they were doing tank tests on small carp to see what colours they preferred. And when they released the tank, the guy turned around and said, the corn's not attached to anything. He said, but don't worry, carp don't eat plastic. So, you know, they're going to reject that plastic. So, and, you know, I've never been told they can detect metal, but if someone tells me they can detect plastic, then I'll extrapolate that and work. And, you know,
don't you think it's the sharpness of the hook that is the thing that?
But plastic's not sharp. So that's going in the mouth, and their receptors are telling them that's not edible. God. So it's just spat out.
Yeah.
So I think, but flipping back, you know, that's what put me off rigs, like historically, like the, you know, like the 360 rig, something that had a lot of metal on it.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm a bit of a convert. Well, I am a total convert now. All of these rigs have got bigger hooks on. You know, I've lost some carp over the years that when I think about it, if I'd been using this stuff, I'd have landed them.
Yeah. So, would you have got the bite though?
I think I would, because, you know, what I've come round to is that for them to eject it, and they probably are going to eject all of this. But I might hook them before the ejection happens, and that's why, like you know, something like that 360 rig or the spinner rig with a lot of metal, it's working because it's hooking them.
It is, but that long hook link, if you're hooking them before they realise, I don't understand the thought process of making it really long, because surely that gives them the opportunity to eject it before it tightens up to the lead.
Well, answering the question is that I didn't know that they knew plastic. You know, when I was using long nylon hook links, I had no clue that they wouldn't swallow plastic. That
Right.
that come later.
But
So-
what I mean is, what do you think now? Do you think? Do you still think it's almost undetectable in their mouth, and that's why you caught them, or because even a nylon hook link is pretty much straight when it's landed on the lake bed, isn't it? Because of the material is slightly. It's not a long braided hook link that can be all over the place. So actually, if they move in the right direction, whether it's 3 inches long or 13 inches long, they're going to hit the lead almost at the same. In the same moment, do you know what I mean? If the hook link's already tight,
I think there's another kind of elephant in the room, and it really depends where we're fishing. If we go back to the reservoir days that you mentioned, the Lockwood, we were catching carp that would go day to day, not come across bait or rig. 30 odd foot of water. If you're there on a high pressure day on the wrong weather, it's not going anywhere near the bottom. We weren't zig fishing back then.
That's cheating anyway, mate. So we're not talking about zigging today.
But
it's not allowed.
When we fish some of these really small pressure venues that we fish, this is the other end of the scale, and these carp are coming across bait and rigs day in, day out. And how they're behaving when they're feeding then is very different. But going back to answering it definitively, I guess logically, if you're trying to detect anything that's foreign, like the smaller the hook, maybe the more chance that they would decide to eat it, if they were. But if I'm fishing for big carp, which what we're generally doing now, sizable fish, I want a hook that's going to land them.
Yeah.
So I am a total convert. I think that they, like I said before, that they may well try and eject all of this. But if they're going, think of how successful plastic sweet corn is, and we know they're going to reject it. So that means it goes in the mouth, and that's when. And also the other thing that I haven't. Okay, I've had the privilege of watching some of this in the margins, but I mean, what do you guys think is the success rate of our rigs? Like, we know we're going to get done, no matter how sharp the hook is. It's just. But if we keep putting it in the right place, then we'll create the opportunity.
That's why I've got millions of rigs in my rig box, and that's why there's a lot of different versions on here. You're almost matching me for versions. Luke's obviously on an economy drive. He's got 2 leads and 2 hooks and a bit of Leadcore. But I'm always looking for something better. Always. That is how my mind works. I'm trying to drive things on and find the next big thing. And I always think that you can do it better. And unless you're absolutely mullering it and you're getting bites, like when we'll talk about the lead systems and stuff a bit more later, but when I moved over to that cog lead, whether you're picking the lead up from the centre of the lead, so there, picking the lead up from the centre, rather, I was catching them quicker. I was catching more, and I was getting bites faster in the session. When you just know, it's like it just keeps happening. I shouldn't have got one as quick as this. And like fishing like Walthamstow 2 and 3, fishing at Gigantica, fishing. I'm trying to think. Where else did I fish it? Fishing at Elstow. It's just like Elstow. I remember clearly. You'd be waiting for tomorrow morning. So you get there, you find them. They love showing at Elstow because you've got deep water with shallow features that you're fishing on. They love showing. You get there early, stand at one end of the lake. You can see all the way down 20 acres or 25 acres, and you see one. And you see another one. You go down there and go to the swim, Alcatraz or whatever, and there they are. Boom, 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 like that, And so you're setting up, but there's no way you're expecting a bite today. You're waiting for it to calm down. Middle of the day when they're not feeding anymore, you have a plumb around and make sure you're on the spot. You bait up and you put the rods out, and then you're waiting for tomorrow morning. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas I do all that, put the cogs out, and it'd go in 2 hours, and it'd keep doing it, and I'm like, there's got to be something in this, So I always think that there is a faster, better, whatever way to catch them, and that's what drives me to keep changing stuff.
Pushing the envelope. But I think in life you want to be like that, don't you? I mean, look, because imagine we were having this conversation before the hair rig come out. I mean, there really was something that was going to revolutionise how many bites you're going to get in a given day. So I think it's the right way to be. Sometimes you can get...
Not always, though. Daryl changes very little, and because he changes very little, we focuses all his attention on finding them, putting it in the right spot. And you can't. I'm a great believer. If you've got 100% effort, you're applying 40% of your effort to the rig you've got on, and Daryl's not applying any of it because he's already got the rigs already tied and he knows what he's putting out. He's then applying a lot more effort to the finding them aspect and getting all of that right, that I'm distracted by this. Do you know what I mean? So it's not it doesn't always work in your favour.
I guess why 10 pence of that would be like carp fishing's a puzzle. Yeah, like so if it was young guys who haven't been doing it as long, listening to this, hopefully there will be some. I'd lean towards Daryl's way in terms of what's the most important thing, because if we're not on them, we're not going to catch anything, are we? Like it's the single biggest thing. But those other parts, they and the reason why I'm calling it a puzzle, because if you get on them and then you're casting out the wrong rig in the wrong situation, and potentially, like, imagine you're up against, like sometimes you're fishing a lake in a period of time where like sweet corn's dominating or a certain bait company's dominating, and you're trying to go against the stream and doing something else. All of that can it can work for you and against you. But the times when you're doing it all right, you're ticking all the boxes, and that's when it's happening.
That's when it's happening. Yeah.
Luke, primarily, what are you looking for when you think about rig selection?
See, I go against. I'm very different to you with that.
Yeah.
Like everything's down to finding the fish and presenting.
So do you ever think that they've been on you, they've been feeding, and you haven't caught them, and you've wrapped up and gone home and thought, I should have had one there?
Yeah, regularly, but I don't ever think that a rig is going to change that.
Right.
I think sometimes they're having it more than others. I think baiting scenario is more important.
Right.
A lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like, as long as I'm sharp and I'm presented, and it's not too obvious a trap, and I can get them down there feeding and competing, more than if it's a real obvious trap with sort of a load of whole 18 millers. They come in there even though they want it. They know
there's something wrong.
There's something wrong, and they're going to feed in a different manner to if it's some bait in a load of weed and whatnot. That's such an obvious
so
trap.
You're a little bit different to that then, Dan. So if you were in a swim and you know that they're on you,
I'm the yin of his yang.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
So are you going for a whole process of trying different rigs out then in that situation? If you know they're on you,
obviously you can't chop and change, because a lot of the time you're going to spook the fish away by winding in and recasting. So I'm not like match angler style but if you've done a 24-hour period and you feel that you should have caught one, then the next 24-hour period I will change something. Whether I go from an 8-inch hookling to a 6-inch hookling, but all the rest of it's exactly the same, or I try a different lead system. So I take a helicopter rig off and I fish a running rig instead, because the bottom's firm enough to accept a running rig. Normally it's mucking around with the length of the hook link and sort of the size of the hook, and maybe I've got pop-ups on and I feel like they've been on me, it's slicking up. I'm seeing signs. Maybe I've seen one show or heard one in the dark or whatever, and not caught anything. Then the next day I might fish the same lead system, put a wafter on rather than a pop-up on. Same bait, everything else, and then see.
Do you find those tramming up situations easier for that? I mean, would you change just one if you were trammed up, would you just change one presentation or change everything? It
depends. If I think they've royally had me over, then I'll change it on every rod. But which does happen. But I get a kick out of it. That's the thing. I always have. I've always loved. When I fished at the Little Grange years ago, before I started Korda, I used to paint my leads, and I used to get the bottom and put it in a little Tupperware thing and take it home, and then paint my leads and drop it in the Tupperware thing on the clay spot that I was going to drop it on the next time I went fishing, and get the one that was the right combination of colours, and then varnish it in matte varnish. And that just made me feel good. I thought, I'm having them. My lead is exactly the same colour as the bottom I'm putting it on, and dental floss hook links and all that sort of thing that absolutely disappeared. And I used to use quite small hooks back then as well, 8s most of the time, But I've always got a buzz out of that technical part of it.
The hook thing as well. Do you think we've moved away from smaller hooks now because bigger hooks have got the same type of, they're so sharp nowadays as well. That's playing more of a part now.
I think though that big hook, small bait thing it's caught so many fish, isn't it? That we're all promoting that.
It just
aren't
works, doesn't it? It
does.
It does. On paper, it shouldn't do, and we thought that for years, didn't we?
Yeah.
But it's evidently does work.
It does. Does.
I'm sure it's harder for them to get rid of a big bit of metal than it is a small bit of metal.
Yeah, and like I say, now with sharpening, with very, very sharp hooks straight out the packet, with pre-sharpened hooks, Kamakura or whatever it is, your Jason Haywoods or whatever. It doesn't matter how big the hook is anymore, does it?
No.
The actual tip of the point
All the same.
can be thinner on a size 4 than an old size 8, whatever super specialist or whatever carbon specimen or whatever hook it was that you used back in the day. B175, all them sort of things. I remember using them size 8 B175.
Well, Bailey was talking about those on the last podcast. Actually, he was saying about the size of the barb on those hooks as well. There's such a big barb on.
Savage, man.
Yeah,
savage.
if they go in, they're not
coming
coming back out, are they? So
no, definitely not.
Everyone here really into sharp hooks.
Yeah,
I
massively.
think it's a no-brainer. Why would you not want them as sharp as they can possibly be?
Yeah, see, I don't use them. I don't use sharpened hooks very much at all. I use sharp hooks straight out the packet a lot of the time because I've lost quite a few in the very early stages of the fight on heavily sharpened hooks, and I think it's certain if you're snag fishing and you're immediately doing that and holding on to them, I felt like they've cut their way out of the mouth. And chod fishing, I remember at Welly, chod fishing in the edge, like 2 ounce lead, 1.5 ounce lead, 1 ounce lead, whatever, just flicking them like they're in Bramble Bay and they're everywhere, and just flicking a chod out, just about feeling something as the lead's gone down, and then completely slack fluorocarbon, and you get an absolute ripper off like that, and you're like. And they're all big, man. They're all big.
I don't know. That might have just been the chod. Then I don't think. I honestly.
But I've had it on loads of it's not just choddies. I've had it on every rig you can conceive, whether it's a bottom bait or a pop up or whatever. I've pulled out a fish on sharpened hooks, and as a consequence, I use them in open water when I'm not having to pull really hard at the start of the fight. But if it's really weedy or I'm fishing against snags, I just won't have them on.
You think that's something we've got to take into account with the age of fish as well? Obviously, like young fish, softer mouths and stuff like that as well. Is there any sort of...
these weren't young fish, though, that I was losing. And I landed a 40-pounder at Welly on... Darryl showed me how to sharpen them, right? So he'd learned, and we went to film a thinking tackle, at Sky Lakes, and we're there for a week, so I've got loads of time. And Darryl's... he's an absolute master at it, and he showed me exactly the angle, and you've got to have the jag clamp and everything, and looking at it through the eye. And he spent half an hour doing one hook, do you know what I mean, and showed me how to do it. And I obviously got right into it. I thought, this is a proper edge, man. So I was using size 4 curves, the captors, so there's no coating on the point of the hook, so they're sharp anyway, but sharpening it down to within an inch of their life. And I remember landing this 40-pounder, and it had hooked like back there, and there was just a perfect slice all the way down, and it had just ended up like on the edge there. And when I unhooked it, I thought, fucking hell, I was lucky to get that in. You know? And this is open water, like October, November time, not massive battles in weed or anything else, just playing it. And then the next spring I lost a couple very early on chod fishing on sharpened hooks, and I thought, that's it. And I just went over to straight, sharp one straight out the packet, never lost anything, and still caught loads. So
I'd like to go back to unsharpened hooks.
Well, you were talking about...
Why is that? Why?
It should be just a lot easier. It's so stressful, isn't it?
Do you sharpen your own still then?
No, not now. Kamakura's all the way.
Yeah.
It's great. It's one less thing you got to do.
And you were talking about the hook holds with the Kamakuras as well. That's something, because the tip of the hook is so fine, they can actually
whenever
turn
you pop
over.
them out, they're always bent over, aren't they? So it's almost like, in a way, like a double barb, like not savagely as a actual 2 barbs, but enough for if the line was to go slack for that to perhaps not not move as much, you know.
Yeah, so sometimes when I've had hook pulls, I've come back and the point has been over like that, and I think where the point's so fine, it's hit something hard, it's not been able to go in any further, so it's not gone in enough. And then, you know, when you're playing them, they're shaking their head the whole time. You might not be able to feel it on mono, but they're not swimming along with their mouth clamped together like that. So they're doing that, aren't they?
Sure,
trying to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And or you change the angle and you've caught them up in that side, and you're not, one way you're pulling the hook in, but the other way you're pulling it out, and their mouth's open and boom, out it comes. And then the point of the hook's over, and then it's them things that have, you know, when I sharpen my own, I do the very, very tip. I don't sharpen so they're long, thin needles. I do the very, very tip so that basically the bit touching the flesh is sharp, but then it goes to the strength of the rest of the hook as quickly as possible. So that you've got best of both.
I made that mistake in early stages. I was taking way too much metal off, and you're taking away the strength of the hook. And I actually snapped the hook. Luckily, I landed the carp because it snapped right at the end, and that was totally what I'd done. It wasn't the hook's fault. So for sure now, but I am the other side of it though, because look, to me, it is. And it doesn't mean anyone's right or wrong, but like if we were predator fishing and we were setting hooks, I'm fine. Do you know what I mean? Because in that scenario, we're setting the hook. But when almost 100% of the carp fishing I'm doing, like the battle's won or long before almost won or lost before I even pick the rod up, with some kind of bolt set up. To me the hook's got to be as sharp as it can be. Now, I don't get me wrong. I've caught truckloads of carp with hooks out the packet.
We did. I did back when I was a kid, and I didn't even check them back then. You just took it as gospel that
so we know
10 of them
works.
hooks is perfect.
I just think that you never know, Dan. Like sometimes, and don't get me wrong, you're still not the outcome you want. But maybe because your hooks were sharper, some of those losses you had, you just wouldn't have even hooked before. I mean, but don't get me wrong. I know the outcome.
I'd rather not hook them and lose them. I'd rather not hook them. I want to land everything, and I haven't got 100% ratio. I don't think anybody has, have they? But it really gets to me when I do lose them. You've seen what I'm like on camera, do you know what I mean? But that's multiplying the feeling, because you've got so much money riding on it, and you're putting yourself in front of everybody. That is your reputation, isn't it? If you just lose one when you're fishing, you just lose one. Do you know what I mean? It's
but that hurts, doesn't it?
I don't depends where you're fishing.
I don't shout, get in that net every single time I land a carp when I'm on my own.
You don't?
No.
Oh no, it's just a
It's a dream start for everyone.
Illusion. I do not. You know, that is something that comes out of me. I'm not doing it to get viewers or anything else. I'm doing it because of the pressure involved in catching one. It means that much more because it's all riding on that fish. You've either got a show or you haven't got a show, and a week of the camera crew's time and all that money and everything involved in it is all hinging on that fish going in the net. You know, and that takes it to another level. So that's why I'm as vocal as I am. But still, I don't like losing them.
Hook sharpness, then, guys, because there's always a debate about testing hooks, and what are your
that's a loaded question, because I said so, didn't I?
You did, and I think we might be on the same side, Dan. But you,
I only go first because I'll admit, and I know a lot of good anglers do this, so it's not a dig. But if you've sharpened your hook, and you've really, like you were alluding to, Luke, you're really taking some time to get it as, if you're doing it yourself, as sharp as it can be, and hone it. When I see people testing it on the hook, I'm cringing. Like, to me, that is no.
Yeah, but you're not pulling a bit of metal into a bit of metal.
I know.
You're pulling a bit of metal into a living thing, a bit of
I hear you.
A bit of soft.
I'm hear you, but imagine I'm in the.
And you're not pulling it. You're just with the tiniest amount.
I'm with you on that, Aaron. I test it on my nail, but I cringe as I'm doing it. I'm like, 1, 2, is it? And you try it again. Oh shit! I think I probably blunted it that time.
Yeah, see, I'm literally like once it's finished in the vise, I'm like just in the soft skin. I'm just looking for it to grab. And when I'm like the finished rig, if I'm dragging it across my hand, I'm looking for that just to, with the minimum of pressure, just to drag, to prick. Not putting any pressure on it, but but again, I know clearly that it's just different ways of.
Right, so talking about the nail test, right? So we get batches of hooks come in, and when they come in, often I'll sit upstairs in product development with 1,000 hooks, and I'll just be pulling them out, the bag of 1,000 like that pre-production run or whatever, and I'll go yep, no, and then if it's enough no's, I go, mate, these are shit. We ain't selling these, and they go back. And we're told by the hook manufacturers, because we've dealt with intermediates and the actual manufacturer themselves, nobody else does that. Nobody, not a single other manufacturer has ever sent a batch of hooks back and said, we're not having them, we're not paying for them. Right? Now, taking it on from that,
Dan, that sounds like a salesman
doesn't
it?
No, it really
yeah.
is that is true, right? I'm not going to tell you the person that told me that, the intermediate, because then that's giving the game away of who the intermediate is. But one of our intermediates, he said, no one, I deal with loads of carp fishing companies, and no one has ever backed a thing of hooks.
Wow.
Ever, right? So taking it on to the next level, Mick, who works here, who's like a human computer, Mick, right? He works in CAD design, and he can burn a bit of plastic and go, it's da 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 da, and he'll tell you the compound of that bit of plastic. Do you know what I mean? He's like Rain Man. He's unbelievable, and he's still got a good relationship with the engineering firm that he used to work for, and they can take ridiculously zoomed in, magnified photographs of anything, because they're talking about moulding tiny items that are going into TVs or the medical industry or whatever, and it's got to be absolutely right. And we got all the ones I'd rejected, we kept them to one side, and all the ones I'd passed, kept them to one side, and every rejected hook had a damage point, and every one that passed had a perfect point. Every single one.
The only difference between what I'm saying and what you're saying is that you're doing that with unsharpened hooks.
Yes.
So they're going to be a little bit stronger. But when I've just sat there and taken away metal to achieve that really sharp hook, it's more susceptible to turning. And Luke talked about that earlier, as you did. When you have a capture and you can turn the tip, because you're making it more without. Like, if I was going to go to Runswater, where I might be lucky enough to catch, 5 in a day or something, I'd be more than happy to use a hook that's out of a packet and reuse it. But if you were sitting there, like, I don't know, the kind of fishing we're generally doing, where if I catch one this trip, I'm going to be over the moon.
Stakes are higher, aren't they? Everything.
Once you've honed that hook, just sticking it in my nail to any degree. But I would be thinking I'd be degrading what I just done. But I hear you.
But when you do the nail test, though, I mean, you test the hook, and if you tested it again and again and again, I've never come across it where I've tested it, like I've tested this one here. This one feels sharp, and you could just bounce the tip off there.
Oh God, I don't.
And then
you definitely blunted that.
Really, but
I almost don't touch my thumb with it. I have to warm my hands up if it's cold. I've never
noticed the consistency of the point change. If I'm literally just dropping the point onto the nail.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't move, that's sharp enough.
Yeah.
But if I do it again and again and again, I still get the same consistency.
What on a sharpened hook?
On an unsharpened.
Yeah, they're so much stronger, aren't they? The points.
I think it depends how fine the point is as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I sharpen mine. The ones I do myself, I'm always using prototype stuff. I've got prototype hooks here that are due to come out in whatever, a year or something. So a lot of time I don't use Kamakuras hardly at all. I've had more problems with the way that I fish when I'm weed fishing and snag fishing with Kamakuras than my own sharpened ones. So as a result, and it's often I'm fishing in weedy situations or snaggy situations, so I don't end up using them. I end up using my own. And then when a pattern comes in that I've designed myself, and the latest one can't be sharpened as a... Well, I guess that they probably could be sharpened like a Kamakura, but to sharpen them yourself, because the eye is so inturned and it's a sweeping shank, you would hit the eye every single time you sharpen them. So you have to sharpen them at an angle like that. So you have to go in from the side and sharpen them like that. And I do that when I'm open water fishing. But I just think sharp ones out the packet. I'm on the lakes that I'm fishing, I'm catching well. So, and I'm not losing a lot. So it suits me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the important thing is, people could get totally blown by all of their minds be blown by all of this contradicting information, but at the end of the day, it all works, doesn't it?
You catch carp, he catches
exactly,
carp.
it all works, and I think as long as the people,
left me out there.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go, Simon, to catch him. Yeah.
Good observation.
Yeah, been fishing all year, haven't you?
Yeah, do you know what? We didn't even arrange that in advance either. Luke just took it upon himself to give you a massive dig in front of us all. I think it
You
worked really
used
well,
to catch
Simon.
carp when you went fishing.
When I went fishing, no offence taken, but carry on.
You only work one day. Was it one day every 2 weeks? Isn't it?
We live here, Tobe, don't we?
We do at the moment.
Anyway,
Really?
what about points on ergs? I mean, into peaked points against straight points. Any preferences on those for you guys? Or what kind of scenarios would you?
I
would
tend
you
to
wanna
use
change?
beaked on everything just because they're the patterns I like.
But would you like that pattern if it had a straight point on it?
Yeah. I'd like the
Right.
choddy with a straight point.
You would.
Yeah.
Right. I think there's quite a few people out there that would like a choddy with a straight point.
Then
Maybe
that's,
we should do that.
that's another choice you got to make. Which one do you use? I hate choices.
Why have you got?
I take 2 pots apart.
Why have you got a preference
so I
for a
don't
straight point?
I think they hook that maybe that little bit quicker,
Yeah.
perhaps.
I think they do.
But there's pros and cons, isn't there? I think maybe they stay in. A beak point stays in when there's no lead. When it's just the hook and the weight of maybe a bit of crap on the line or whatever, will stay in the mouth better. Perhaps, I don't know. Less chance of dinking on the bottom, small fish moving them about on the bottom or whatever.
I definitely
With a
think
beak.
there's something in that, Luke, because I remember fishing for some old carp in quite a well-known lake with a publicity ban, and it was barbless hooks only.
Yeah.
And I hadn't done a lot of barbless hooks fishing, and I went in with the kind of pattern that I normally use, and to be fair, it was the worst scenario. Like, I was catching them in a kind of an area where it wasn't, in open water where it wasn't weedy, and then you had a bank of marginal weed. So you've got no problems until you bring the carp to the danger. They plough into the Canadian, and honestly, any barbless hook is going to be struggling. But I did chat to one of the locals, and I said, I'm having a nightmare. I think my first 3 fish on the spin lost them, and they weren't, the ones you want to land. And he was saying to me, and at the time I'd not used a lot of like a kind of like a very curved hook, and it's kind of like what you're kind of hinting towards, that when you've got like a more of a curved pattern, they tend to naturally stay in because they're obviously there with the barbless. You don't even have the security of the barb. But yeah, if you're out and out trying to hook something, and also,
that's why we never did a long shank in a barbless. We only ever did long shanks in long shank and long shank X because we realised that the first ones we did were too fine wire for a lot of situations, and eventually those ones, we just sold them out and we didn't replace them, and long shank X is the only one. But that's why we never did it in a barbless, because I think that straight point, especially with a long shank hook, has got a lot of leverage to pull it out. I just think you're asking for trouble, and I think of it as, in nature, an eagle's talons are curved to hang on to that bit of fish, aren't they? So you're using that same thing, that those laws of nature are have happened over millions of years of evolution. They can't be wrong, can they? No. So yes, I think a curved pointed hook will stay in better, but I do think a straight pointed hook will nick the flesh that nanosecond sharper. And we are talking about nanoseconds, aren't we, when it comes to a rig being sucked in and blown out.
There is nanosecond fine lines, isn't there, between hooking and not hooking, and the carp of your dreams and not catching.
You don't want to nick one and it fall off, do you?
No.
No. So it's always a compromise, isn't it? Always a payoff between is the rig going to react really fast and I'm going to hook everything, but I'm only going to land 70% of them, or am I going to get less bites but I'm going to land 95% of them? There's always a payoff.
To when you was using chod rigs and you had a couple come off quick, I always think their carp you simply wouldn't have hooked on anything other than a chod rig. So yeah, we don't like to lose them, but I think those chod rigs nick you those fish that you wouldn't hook on any, in a situation where you're not going to hook them on a conventional rig, up in the weed.
Maybe. I mean, there was a situation at Welly in this Bramble Bay. there was Canadian and other types of weed everywhere. It's like 4 foot deep, and there's 2 foot of weed, maybe more. And if you do get the opportunity to go out in the boat and look at it, it's all coming up at different levels the bottom. It's not a blanket by any stretch, and you know you're casting with a choddy like that. So I've got a 2 ounce or 1.5 ounce lead on. The Leadcore is probably a little bit longer than that. Choddy's sitting down there before I cast out, so the hook doesn't come into contact with the lead. And when you cast out, it's doing that. As you stop the cast, it does that again and forces the bait back down to. But as the lead goes through the water,
as you follow it down with your tip,
as the lead goes down through the water, because the lead is heavy and is sinking, and that's light, it's pushing it back up to that top bead. Yeah. You know, and then I think as that sinks, this slides back down again and just finds its wherever its place is in the weeds. And it was perfect for Bramble Bay, and I caught quite a few fish on it. And I was fishing match the hatches, so I was fishing with the cell and I was baiting up with cell, and basically I was halving them. It's when the cutter first came out. Another little sales pitch there for you. And I was halving them and putting them out as halves. Have you ever catapulted out halves?
Yeah, horrible.
Oh no, they don't go very far, but they make no splash today. It's like the rain. It's like just gently, like someone's just flicking them out like that. And I can get like 20 millers cut in half. I was getting 15 yards, 20 yards, something like that, and they'll just.
Yeah, ideal for chod fishing because they spray, don't they?
Spray, yeah. And I'll put out probably a couple of kilos of chops. So that's quite a lot of food items. And then the next morning or that afternoon, I can't remember, probably the next day, at 15 to 20 yards, I've got 40-pound heads just like coming out of the water like that, not making a sound, and there's big old fizzies going on, and I've got 3 match the hatch chods amongst it, and you're casting with a light lead, and if you feel something, that is absolutely fishing, man. If it's like just instantly solid, you wind it in and have another go until the lead's fallen between 2 bits of weed, and hopefully it's presented. And all day this has gone on. And it's at such close quarters, I'm like, oh my God, like you just, you know, I drunk 15 cups of tea. If I'd smoked, I would have smoked 2 packs of fags, do you know what I mean, that day? So in the end, I got a bite, and it was an upper 20, got it in, and this happened to me again the next day. So the next time I went down there, you know, this is getting onto this about you wouldn't have caught them if you didn't have a chod on. I thought, they're having me over here. They are feeding all around them chods, and they are not taking them because everybody chod fished on Welly. Everyone. Oh, excuse me. Everybody. I learned to chod fish on Welly basically because the guy in the swim next to me, I was fishing with chods, right? And he looks a bit like Keith Lemon, this bloke, right? Can't remember his name, right? And it's just going out like that, and it's just landing. There's no stopping it. There's no feet down. Just like into the water like a bullet, right? And he's having them. I'm fishing like a lead clip with a long coated hook link on and a slow sinking bottom bait, you know, like a proper, you know, balanced wafter and everything. Fishing in little holes, and I'm casting. Oh yeah, that's going. And he's absolutely wiping the floor with me. I've not had a bite, and this bloke's ended up having 3 or 4 plus, including one of the big ones. And I'm not at that point. I've got to put these things on. I was like anti-chod up until that point. I thought I've got to put these things on, and I had a brilliant spring on them. And this was the latter part of that spring. So the next time I went, they were in Bramble Bay again. Did the same thing with the chops, and I put basically IQD rigs on, like I'd caught the fish on in the underwater, but with a size 4 wide gape, captor one. IQD rig about that long, match the hatch wafter that I'd cut the top off so it looked like a half bait, even though it wasn't completely a half bait, and just cast it into the worst horrible, like just solid like that. Put a bit of foam around it, and just basically put the tips of the rods like down and everything tight, so it was all, the Leadcore was all pulled into the weed, but obviously the hook link was up like that, and then obviously the foam just melts. And then like give it about 10 minutes and then just slacken off and just leave it. And I caught really well from then on.
Wow.
You know, on effectively a bottom bait that nobody would have cast a bottom bait into the weed that I was casting into. And I think you know, it was the chods had been overfished, you know, and the fish were eating that bait in the weed with such gusto that it didn't actually matter. Even if it was snarled up, I think they just sucked and sucked and sucked until they got it in their mouth because they were so like into the bait.
You
know?
touched on something. I remember like back in the day, like fishing some very clear gravel pit and just seeing how bait looked when you were throwing it in the weed. And I remember throwing whole boilies and it's just like completely disappearing from sight.
And they still get them though, don't they?
For sure, but it's like you know when you've got fish at home in a pond or something, you know when you're watching them there, you know how you imagine what might be going on as an angler versus what carp are really doing. You know, they're feeding on the side of the pond, you know what I mean? Like on the ledge here, there, on the surface here, there and everywhere. So like to me, like you said, you know, when you were firing out half baits, that's all just like fluttering down, sitting and resting on the weeds.
Some of it's going in, some of it's rolling over and going in on its side, some of it's sitting in. And I think as they go to eat it, it's all dislodging it and it's all going further and further in, and they're just like, I'm having this. This tastes really nice. I'm going for it. Like, you know, and that's when you get all the big plumes of bubbles coming up because they're disturbing the bubbling.
With so much more confidence, don't they?
With
that in that situation, I'd sooner fish like that than I would on a sort of like clean.
Yeah, mate,
you
definitely.
know, I think if you can present like that, you know.
I'd say, look, I've never experienced that, but that maybe that's the kind of scenario, you know, when you're doing something different to everyone else, then you get the rope, especially if like any rig like the Chod has been done to death. But to me, the Chod is very powerful. Like the ability to present baits.
It's the biggest leveler. In terms of rigs.
We can have,
like you say, when that bloke's going, like it's going in like a sack of spuds, and that's what the Chod rig can do.
Exactly. We wasn't tangled. He was fishing. Every single cast he was fishing, no matter what he landed on. You know, he was fishing, and it's a bit forgotten now, isn't it?
Now it is. I was going to say that. I think it's sort of everything comes round in everything, let alone fishing. But fashions change, don't they? And people aren't using that. Not to what I've seen. The Chods have been forgotten a bit. But it's all Ronnies and that, which are great again. But
that's a version of like of a rig on a lead, isn't it? And it's like, and then you need you generally need the spot presentable to be able to get the bite. Like I remember last year, I was fishing at range in the spring, and the area is like really presentable, like relatively deep water, sort of 16, 17 feet, and I'm doing quite well on sort of a balanced bottom baits, and it's all good. But as we moved, typical carp, the water's getting warmer and warmer, and I'm coming up for my next trip, and it's probably late spring now, and I'm standing there just looking out there. Is anything going to show near a fish? And like a fish has come along the shelf, like reed line shelf, classic. It's going to happen, and I can't. There was no vantage point to look above where the reeds were, where he come from, but in front of me you can already see the Canadian coming up. And I guess one of the things I'd kind of like to reiterate to the younger guys, like that's where the Chod is just can't be beaten.
Oh no!
Because like for me, that scenario was like Leadcore's bang there, so it was naked Chods. I'm guessing what's down there, okay, but by relatively light lead, because in this situation I'm not going to use a lead to hook it, but just for the
enough to
casting.
get you out.
Exactly that. I ended up sticking 2 rigs down there. I've guessed, judging on what I'm looking down here, roughly what is down there.
Not a lot of people do that, mate. Either not a lot of people look at what's in the edge and drop their rigs into what's in the edge, like as a likeness to what they're casting. Very few people balance a pop up, but they don't go and find a bit of weed that's similar to what's coming in on the hook when they're winding in, and then drop the rig into that. Everyone drops it on a lovely bit of clear, and it takes about 15 minutes to hit the bottom.
Looks perfect.
That's going. But if I did that at Elstow, where you find the silkweed and drop the rig into the silkweed it's actually going to be landing in, and just see what it looks like then. And that's a good thing, something that people that don't do that should put into their fishing. Definitely what you've said there.
Yeah, but looking at a Chod, like you say, the Chod on the line, when you drop that into a bit of Canadian in the edge, all you see is a boilie.
Exactly.
When you see that, you think,
Yeah.
wow, that's why it's so devastating.
So and again, to those like the younger guys, like I managed to get two rigs out there, like literally 2 casts. You're literally just flicking it down the direction roughly. You're just gauging, how. I mean, he wasn't tight to the reeds. He was 6 foot off them. A little bit of broken bait down there, as we talked about before, just to land on top of the on top of the
Is that to
Canadian.
get the fish to stop?
Yes.
Rather than
yeah,
just...
Yeah. I used to be so much more into single hook baits than I am now. And I know you have to be careful because there's a time and a place for everything. Yeah.
Yep.
But are much more, and maybe as well, like we've chatted in the past about, like, you know, with some of these mild winters we've been having where they really do feed right the way through, and if you're applying food, you know, you're really increasing your probability. But where I'm kind of going, where that chod is powerful, is any other version of rig, you would have probably needed a couple of casts. You know, am I getting a drop? None of that.
Yeah.
2 casts flicked down there, a little bit of broken bait,
You're fishing.
slack the line down. Exactly. I think it was, you know, it was like 3 hours later and I'm away and it's a nice one. Like, you know, and that's the thing, like, you know, to you know, to try to get across is like, you know, walk away from the mark rod. Like, you've just seen a big carp swim through the margin. Now is not the time to thrash the swimmer bits.
Yeah.
Like,
Definitely.
the opportunity
Couldn't
could be
agree more. Yeah,
it could be minutes. And
too many people are, you know,
thinking tonight, the morning,
thinking about wraps and this that. And sometimes you just got to
Yes.
go with what you see.
Exactly.
I think it depends on the type of fishing you're doing, because I grew up fishing layer pits, which was loads of bites.
Yeah.
You know, and that it's
don't-
very difficult to actually forget that mentality.
No, don't get me wrong. I use that sort of thing all the time. I'm always wrapping up, but sometimes you've just got
you
got
go
to fish
for
to
what's
what
in
you
front
is
of
it's
you.
fish to
about
what you see.
applying it to the, you know, the more big fish fishing you do, the more you have to think like that. The more multiple hit fishing you do,
Absolutely.
the less it's not even on your radar to think like that. So I think it's about applying it to the scenario that you're in.
Yeah, I definitely
you know.
hear you, Dan. But exactly like, you know, Luke was saying, the previous week, mate, I've been in this swim, X amount of wraps. You know, I had 3 rods on a spot. You know, like, you know, spodding over it.
What lake was this?
One in Kent. But you know, but the difference was, like, you know, God, they're in the margin. Like, and where what I'm trying to get across here is that, you know, we're hunting something.
Yeah.
Minimum disturbance. Like, you know, just like, you know, okay, I might not have caught anything, but we know just through if you keep putting it in the right spot, when that opportunity comes, then you will be rewarded.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I'm.
Is that your naked chod there?
Yeah, it would.
Can I have a look?
It would have been. There's no putty on that, but it would have been something very similar to that. Maybe a little bit of a lighter lead, and it would have been further up the.
Can I
the
test
wallow.
this hook?
Yeah, go on and have a go. I think it would be.
I'm joking. So is this fluorocarbon?
No, it isn't. But you know, one thing. You know,
pull the mic
Can you
right
go
down.
back
Yeah,
to
sorry.
your mic, mate? Sorry.
I guess one thing I would stress to anyone who's going to use naked shots who haven't used them is that I remember when we were kind of forced, you know, it was that period when we were using chods on lead cores, and then some lakes were banning lead core, but you knew how powerful the chod was, so you were having to use it naked. I learnt the hard way about, you know, how you know, it's not suitable to be having a chod being pulled at a 90-degree angle on mono. Like, it's an absolute no-no. So that bottom bead, for anyone who's never fished
Line
like
saver
that,
bead,
is absolutely key. Because
It
what's going to happen is once you've hooked that carp, that bead is going to end up near down here, and rather than the swivel putting on the line and reducing your break down, it's pulling against the bead.
Swivel, yeah.
So it is look.
Does that always happen? Does the bead always move? You don't end up with the lead still on and it's still on a bit of a tail?
I've landed a couple of tench, you know, where it's up there.
But not carp?
No.
Right,
Anything
okay.
that's been sight, like that, you know, that's, you know, sorry, I was just talking about, like, they were both nice carp. The first one was 39 and then it repaid the next day. Both times it's right down the bottom. And they weren't even like crazy fights.
Right.
But, and again, you know, like credit where it's due, the ability to be able to fish that rig. And okay, the Canadian weed wasn't like, you know, like unfishable, but you still didn't want the lead on if you could drop it. And it was exactly the scenario where, you know, I needed the lead to cast, I've hooked the carp, and then I want to get rid of the lead.
Yeah.
To me,
what ounce lead did you have on in that
I probably
situation?
would have been 2 or 2.5, I think.
And
I probably
how far down the edge was it?
I reckon, because there was a little tree, I was probably no more than 20 yards. I mean, you could have gone lighter down, but I just, honestly, didn't have anything lighter.
Do you find if you've got stiff rods, having a very light lead on, sometimes you just can't feel anything? And the casting's actually quite difficult with because the rod hardly bends at all. So trying to
mine are 3 1/4. So I know some of your stuff you're using sort of pokier rods, but I remember those casts, and they were like, it's landed in Canada, but like you know, 100, like it would be one of them. And yeah, I thought,
But you wouldn't want it to go dong.
no,
with it.
exactly. I just thought to myself, this is fishing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where, and again, I know that it'd be interesting what Luke does there. Is that with Chods, I don't stick any foam on it. Like, and I don't.
I don't.
Right, okay, because I've always been and I know Dan maybe
mapley.
feels it. With me putting that bit of foam, just the kind of mechanics of it, I'm totally happy for it just to gently settle down. It's immediately fishing, and I was always concerned about, even with Leadcore, about you pulling it up and not getting quite what you wanted. But I know you felt a bit differently sometimes about even would you put a bit of foam on when you're chod fishing.
Yeah, like I say, but what I would do is I would put the tip of the rod under, fishing with fluorocarbon, feel something, that's good enough. Put the tip of the rod down and rest it on the front of the swim with the line tight, and then I knew from doing tests how long it took for the foam to melt.
Right.
And you'd leave it much longer than that. If it took 12 minutes as the longest,
so
I'd leave it at least 15.
Yeah.
So it's under tension, and then while the rod's in the water, then start slackening off there. So hopefully it's not going to move from that position that it's in out in the lake. I should say out in the pond, really, shouldn't I? That's the cool way to say it. I'm thinking that it's going to stay in that same position.
It makes sense, but just being 100% honest, just of all those years now of doing it without the phone, I'm like, if honestly, if I thought it wasn't presented and I was going to get caught up in the weed, I'd pretty much like, if anything else I'm doing and there is siltweed around and I have got a normal rig, then I would use a bit of foam. So I think with the Chod, I think it's so effective at just gently settling down over it. I don't think you need to.
Yeah, I don't use foam at all anymore.
Oh, okay.
I haven't used it for probably. I used it back in the welly days because probably inexperience for one, and like the foam hadn't been out a massive amount of time, and I had used it for other things, had tested it a lot in the edge and everything else. We used it on the underwater film because it was pure white, and if you miscast, you could drag the rig a little bit closer towards you without dinking the point of the hook, because you could see it was up off the bottom. But we cast a couple of times into the swim, and it took forever to melt, and they were swimming all round it and spooking off it because it was still up there. Do you know what I mean?
I've spent days in the winter reeled in with a piece of
that was like
tiny shrunken up snotty bit of rock hard foam on it.
So I don't, and if you're long range fishing, it cuts the range down so much as well, so I don't.
And also, because if you're at like Halton and that lake in Kent, I was fishing in relatively deep water, and it wasn't so much of a problem on Halton because it's relatively short range fishing, but the lake in Kent, you're whacking it, and I'm trying to get 3 rods on one area, and obviously in big crosswinds in the winter, you're getting miscast. So by having no foam, it's easier just to swim back in, go back out.
It's getting into that rhythm, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've miscast. If you had to put a bit of foam on or whatever,
it'd be a nightmare.
The gap between the casts, then you never get get your eye in,
for sure. But this year I've done a load of fishing in the margin, using a baiting pole. I'm not saying you've got to do it
with a chod.
No, I'm talking about regular rigs now, but a little bit of foam. Sorry, I'll
see. That's
around.
Probably the one time I would use foam is in a pole,
right? Because you
case you hook one of them bits. Your hook comes through a bit of free offering.
I remember having this conversation with a mate and a bait boat, and we were using corn. It was in France.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Why are you bothering with the foam and all that?" And he goes, "What happens if that?"
Yeah.
Then what happens to me next morning? Reeled in with a bit of this. So it does happen.
Yeah.
Like to eat
and
my
at least
hat.
then, because you're not casting it, you can dink it on the tiniest little bit. So
Yeah.
it's almost, and because you're fishing close, you see it come up to the top. It's come off, don't you?
Yeah.
Then it's like that's sitting there proper, man. That's happening.
In a pole scenario, I'd certainly use it like that.
Slacking off opposed to like fishing tight. Would you always slack off on these rigs or fish a tighter?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask. Ask everyone, because what I don't like about chods, and that's where something like I prefer the hinge stiff, even though a reverse combo, whatever you want to call it. If you're at range, that's when I'm not look, if you're at range and you've got a clear bottom, I don't know why you'd be using a chod, but if you were, you're not worried about keeping it down and everything's fine. But when you suddenly are in a scenario where you might have the bottoms undulated or there's weed between you and where you're fishing, that's or you've got big undertows on big pits and stuff like that. That's when I start to get about like the chod, is it getting pulled, and I'm like, am I in a situation that, and I don't know, look, we know zigs work, so even if it was raised off the bottom, you could still get your bite, but it's not quite what you want. So answering the definitive question, if I'm fishing a chod, I generally want to be slack because I want it to be left exactly how it landed.
I think if you've got weed in between where the ledge landed and where the rod tip is, and things start to tighten up, I think it can pull it all up off the bottom,
especially
and then your choddies like they can almost swim underneath
go underneath it,
it's just standing up there off the bottom. And I think in that situation, I think if you've got a hinge stiff on, at least that the boom section allows it to
Didn't that
find
happen
its
on
way
an
to the
underwater?
bottom.
Was there an underwater where it was hanging?
It happened
underneath?
with Nick Hellier, didn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Nick's been in recently, isn't he?
Yeah,
as
last
well.
podcast.
Right, okay. Good old Nick the Stick.
Yeah.
That was what he put out. One of the Dynamite Meat and Marine, I think it was.
That's
the
right.
ground bait,
That's
wasn't
right.
it?
It's his bags, wasn't it?
Yeah, a stick and a single tiger nut.
They were hanging
and
underneath it, weren't they?
wanged it in there, and the stick melted, and the bait was like just
It's like a
wobbling
beach caster, like a reverse
underneath
beach
the lead
caster,
core because it was all tight.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
if he'd slackened off, then it probably wouldn't have happened. But you wouldn't know that, and I think that's a lot of the times when you think I should be catching them and I'm not catching them. Often there's something wrong with how it's sitting, and they're just like, it's never going to get eaten, fish, but you don't know. On the underwater film, you know, but in a normal situation, you don't know.
Not got the
And that's the
luxury of
times when you think, I'm just going to bring one in and redo it, and you put it back out there, and it goes in like 2 minutes, and you're like, there was something wrong with that.
What about dropping leads on chods now? Have you seen it as a bit of a game changer, for
Got to
landing
be
fish?
in weedy areas, for me, definitely. Yeah.
If you have to fish heavy leads, I think. Light leads, I would rather not drop them.
Really?
Real light, light leads,
See,
I'd rather.
I don't on my helis.
not.
I don't with light leads, but on chods, I just do just because I go with what I sort of stick with what I know, and I've done that for quite a few years. And
your choddies there, you're fishing 1.5 ounce leads as well, aren't you?
as light as I can get away with.
Yeah, for that purpose, really.
Yeah, just to get me out there.
Yeah.
1.5 ounces, 2s. I'd use a 4 if I had to fish them.
How do you two? Because I did say I talked on the phone with both of you before we started, and I was talking to Aaron about, or was it you? I said I'd never caught a fish on a naked chod.
Yeah,
I can't remember who I said it to.
Yeah.
Well, I have actually caught one, because I caught one when we were filming in Germany on it, because that's what Darryl was catching on. But one's nothing, is it? Do you know what I mean? How with it all slack, and with that much movement in it and that little resistance, what do you think happens? Because we've never been able to film underwater in the weed, because you can't. The hook bait just drops behind a bit of weed and you can't see anything anyway. Right. So there's no point. If you could mow a bit of weeds perfectly flat and have it sitting in it, and you could see what. I'd love to do that. But the other thing is the weed is covered in sediment as well. So when you wind in, you flush all the sediment off the weed. Out there, because we did put cameras in weed beds on St John's, and the fish have only got to come in and do that, and the whole thing just puffs up, and you can't see anything. So we just had to scrub, filming in the weeds. Yeah, so I've never seen it happen. Obviously, I've caught loads on chods myself, and my sort of the way of doing it, having the bead as far up the lead core as possible. And normally my lead core would be longer than that. And the lead core is sinking the pop up, so I've got no weight actually on the thing.
Yep.
Yeah, lead core is actually sinking, and I genuinely believe that when they suck at it, I actually think that bit of lead core moves slightly to allow it.
Yeah, I could see it happening.
To get into their mouth, just fractionally,
that's why I like
but enough for it to get in, because it's a very restrictive rig, really, isn't it?
On the lead core.
On the lead core,
definitely. That's why I don't like it. I won't use one. I've never caught carp on one, I don't think.
Yeah.
On lead core, because I think it's all too.
Yeah, it's definitely.
There's not the movement there is in a bit.
I've saw Bailey actually with one of those rigs, and he put an extra link on there as well, so the link would lay flat on the bottom, and it just gave it that little bit of extra movement.
It's a very short hinge rig.
Very short hinge, and my friends fish like that as well, actually, and it just gives that little bit of extra, because you just want an inch or two.
But if you're fishing in weed, and that hinge isn't long enough to hit the bottom, and it's fallen down below the lead core, and the lead core's in the way of the hook, bait. The two are at the same level, and the fish goes in to take the hook bait and touches the lead core because it's, the hinge has gone down here and it's all ended up at the same level. I don't want that, So when I fish a hinge, I fish a longer boom, so that and I don't fish it in. Well, I have actually fished it in that ridiculous sort of weed, but I don't know. I just them very, very short booms. I worry about that in heavy weed because of that thing of it ending up underneath the lead core, But yeah, what I was going to say, I think it moves that little bit. I think you've got the weight of the fluorocarbon, and I think like the hook's in the mouth, but it's not really. There's no pressure pulling it in, is there? At
but
that
it is.
point?
It is.
I think it's when they rise up and they start doing that.
But you know what?
That's when it.
Your line's all in that weed and that, and it's got.
I think there would be quite a bit of resistance.
Yeah. In certain scenarios, we can.
But also, one real benefit is like if we're fishing a bottom bait, like. Versus the chod, like the hook's sitting there very aggressive, like from the word go, like so as that carp comes to take it, like it's immediately like that, boom. Yeah. It's only got to just move fractionally, and
it's got to close its mouth, and it's
it's there, like
Is there any footage, do you know, of a fish taking a chod? Is there any underwater footage of that?
Don't know. Yeah. There you go.
Never seen it.
I've never seen it.
I wouldn't be surprised if there is now, because there's a lot of like where the kind of technology's getting cheaper. You're seeing a lot of guys.
There's a lot of home movie type stuff, isn't there, on YouTube of fish take, but. I would imagine it will end up being a chod on a clean spot rather than in weeds.
Yeah, but then that's.
I mean, it shows how the rig works, how it's taken in, but it's not the same scenario that you would choose to use it in, is it? So it's not actually telling us that much.
Fascinating to see in some low-lying Canadian.
Yeah, and I mean, your scenarios over the underwater, you're just not in that position to be able to do that, I guess.
We at St John's, we had 2 underwater rigs, so we had 2 sets of camera equipment. So 2 different umbilical cables going back to the bank. We could watch on 2 different screens. So we put one out in the middle of the bay in the weed, and we tried putting rigs in front of it and everything else, and it just, because it's so up and down the weed, it just fall. When it was fishing, it was presented, you would catch one on it, but there's one bit of weed, it was just like in front of the hook bait, so you couldn't see anything. You knew it was there, because you'd seen it come through the scrim and find its place. But what's the point? You can't, and then what you're doing then is you're recasting far more than you ever would to try and get it perfect, and that's ruining the swim. We never do that, do we? Over and over and over again. No. If you can get out their first cast, perfect. That's what you want. So, I'd love to put it out in a situation, where it is weedy. And you see, the next one we're planning to do, the lake we're thinking of, is quite weedy. So with this pan and tilt system, where you can look at the middle of the spot or the back of the spot or the front of it, if we positioned it in such a way that a long cast would end up in the weed, and you could put a rig into the weed just off the spot.
Or what about in shallow water, where you could wade in sort of up to your chest and almost lay a chod down in front of it?
You've got to have that unique situation. It's finding shallow, clear water that the fish like to visit during the day, that isn't going to be affected by any other anglers, that the birds aren't going to be on you like ridiculous, like the birds just absolutely crucify you on it, they really do. We're thinking about getting a bird of prey down for the next one.
So you think they get an air gun?
Honestly, getting these guys, these falconers, to come in and just clear the whole area of birds, so we can actually start making the film. Because if you're in shallow enough water, even mallards are getting you. Ain't got to be a tufty or a coot or anything.
I remember fishing at the quarry in Essex in like 3 and 4 foot of water. That'd have been ideal for that. Just low-lying Canadian,
In the building sites from there, I was getting done by seagulls once. They would dive bombing there. It was probably 2.5 foot of water, and they could see the bait, and they were, whacking it,
I guess it's another advocate for sharp hooks, isn't it? A sharp hook on there as well.
Definitely, there's a lot to be said for sharp hooks in this situation, isn't there? A big hook as well, Aaron. That's I'm surprised that you would have a 4 on. Are you a big hook man? With
4s exclusively, really.
With naked chods?
With everything, yeah.
Right.
With chods, size 4 choddies,
And are you making this mapley smelling?
I couldn't comment.
You're making that yourself, obviously. That's a cork ball.
That's a cork ball, mate. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've used a bait screw in the bottom of it.
Yeah, I like them. I've used them for years.
Which are quite heavy, aren't they? So that must be really buoyant.
It is, but because it's the cork ball, I'm getting away with it. But even some of the pop-ups, if you buy them now, like I think they've still got some particles.
Some of them are nuclear, aren't they? They're so buoyant.
Yeah.
They're
But I know
ridiculous.
I know the old school way is the kind of dental floss and stuff like that. But I like the bait screw. It's,
I'm coming round to the bait screw, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty convenient.
Never used one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the movement's nice. It's obviously lightning quick, and I've whacked loads. Like I've never, touch wood.
That's really hard, that pop up, isn't it?
Yeah, yes.
Are you drying these out? For
That's dried, yes, for sure.
And how many hook baits you make in one batch?
Well, I didn't make those ones, but they
Didn't make these
no, I
ones.
didn't make them.
Shame on you! I thought you were old school.
I'm not gonna lie. At the stage, when I started, we were making bait, but at the stage you could buy good quality bait. The bait making. I know there's that kind of benefit that if you catch something on your own one, it is the extra bit. But I'm not gonna lie, like it's a bit of. I see it as a chore, but
even hook baits though.
I still every now and again I definitely do. Yes,
Right.
But
When the lakes are frozen over, isn't it?
yeah.
I used to make them on the
Sat hard
bank.
in the
I used to sat with a kit with me and make them on the bank because I'm
Really?
sitting there behind the rods and
Yeah,
do it.
good
Have
idea.
all the little pots and everything, drying them all out, and
That's like those pictures of
I used-
Terry Dempsey and stuff like that on the tip.
Yeah,
lake,
only hook
it's-
baits. I'm
right.
not rolling like
Right.
6 egg mixes or anything like that. It's a one egger. But and is that matching what you're feeding
No, it's similar.
Similar.
Yeah.
in colour or in attractor as well?
No, honestly, quite often I'd be using that if I was using the cell. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it is in answer to your question. Obviously, it's similar in colour. They both like wash out and they've got more a whiter appearance when they've been in the water for a while.
How long do you want it to take to hit the bottom on a naked chod? How is it ridiculous? Like it's taking 2 minutes?
No. Now I look. I'm like when if you sometimes I'll talk about I'm using a balanced hook bait, okay, but I'm acutely aware when carp come in a swim, and if you've got any feeding going on at all, there's a lot of disturbance, and I don't want the thing doing all this kind of stuff. To me, then you're getting into the realms of foul looking it, or not even getting the bite. So I guess I'm trying to achieve something similar to what a freebie would be. So I guess you've observed the hook's big. So if I can negate the weight of the hook, then that's what I'm aiming for.
So when you drop it in, then is it sinking that fast?
Well,
is it like that?
I don't.
What?
Probably a little bit faster than that. But you know what, Dan? I don't dwell on that, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm a little bit different to Luke, and I've caught I only use the naked shot if I've got to. Like I just prefer the Leadcore.
And on the Leadcore, you have a second bead up here so that this can't travel.
Yeah,
do you?
I never
fish it completely sliding.
I never
like.
used to. So I'd say even now, like the bulk of the carp I've had, people might say it's like a free running one, like that. But where I was different to yourself, I know you said you normally use a longer Leadcore, but I wouldn't have the bead anywhere near the top. Okay.
Right.
I'm judging what the bottom's like, and I'm probably like halfway, maybe getting on towards 2/3.
Right.
But I want a reason about Leadcore. But the reason why I'm not so bothered about the fluttering down bit is because I know it works on Leadcore because I've proved that to myself, and that's going down much faster.
And why Leadcore over naked then?
Historically, even though now we've got the kind of even when we didn't have the beads. And I remember being a member of a club where Leadcore was banned. I guess I was bending the rules here, but I was hiding a 3-inch section-ish of Leadcore in tubing. So you had the buffer effect, which some of the companies have brought out now, which is nice. You visibly couldn't see the Leadcore, but when I get the fight,
it finds its way down there, and that's taking
and then
all
I
the
didn't have to
force.
worry about net. Whereas now, obviously, we've got everything to make this fish very well and safely. But this might be nothing more than habit. If I can use the Leadcore, I prefer it.
Right.
The strength. Even though now I know, I've had plenty of. We spoke about it. I know it works. But I just prefer it. Even though it's probably something I can't quantify, but maybe just even habit.
Right. Yeah. Well, you stick with what works. You have a winning formula, don't you? And you know that that's going to work, and you fish it with confidence because you've caught on it before. That's why you keep using the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Through experience.
Luke, with chod rig as well, because you're fishing low line chod rigs as well, aren't you? You mentioned on the last podcast as well, they were quite low line, and you were fishing chods over bait as well. Do you?
Yeah, I'll always fish them over bait, really. Well, always, generally, but you can, obviously they're good as a single bait approach, aren't they? But
it's not something you necessarily associate with when you're trying to get a feeding situation going, that you would necessarily plonk a chod rig in there, but you...
I do, though, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I like to fish in the shit and the weed, and as long as I'm presented, where chod rigs are, going back to...
let me ask you, so you get in a swim, there's an area out there that is cleaner, whatever, it's, there's a silty bit in the weed, or there's a gravelly bit or whatever. Yeah. So you purposely ignore that entirely, or do you try it, and if it doesn't work, then you fish in the weed?
Yeah, perhaps. Everything's based upon what I see. If I'm seeing fish show on evidently clean bit, then I'll fish there.
Right.
If they're...
But you're opening gambit. You go in a swim, you've not fished it before, you have a lead around, you find a clear bit, get a nice drop on it.
Yeah.
Pulls back a little bit. It's nice. It's not great big bits of gravel, which is nice.
Yeah. It's just...
And then to the right of it is you're bringing in Canadian, or you're bringing in silkweed.
Yeah.
What do you do in that
There's
situation?
loads of variables, isn't there? But generally, of course, yeah.
No, I want to know. Don't take the variables out of it.
It depends time of year, the lake you're fishing.
Yeah. So go on.
But I mean, yeah, you're going to go on the cleaner bits. But the reason I've gone in the swim is because I've seen fish.
Yes.
And where I've seen fish, I'm going to lead up first. And
yes. Right. Okay.
Ultimately, if that's presentable but weedy or choddy and not the nicest of spots, if that's where they've been, or I've seen them sheeting up there, that's where I'm fishing.
Right.
Everything's based on what I see.
Yeah,
Very
sure.
rarely you have to go and drop into a swim where you haven't seen anything.
And what about, I think of a scenario I fished recently where I saw a fish caught out of the swim on a clear bit when I got there, and a fish showed in between the lady that was fishing, called Wendy. Hello, Wendy, by the way. And her husband was in the swim next door. Fish showed in between the two of them. When they'd gone, I had a cast around, and it was like that eelgrass stuff, that bright green sort of, the different stems are different colours of green. And the lid comes through it lovely. You could play a fish through it, no problem, but there's no drop at all.
Right.
Where that fish was. Now, I found a lovely bit of sort of clay that was about 2 rod lengths away at the back of the weed bed.
Yeah.
And that's where I fished. Would you have put one in that weed?
No, I'd have probably, depending on maybe the depth, it might come up. They don't come straight up, do they? But no, probably on the clay to begin with, maybe.
Right.
One in
Because
each.
I had a real cast round. I tried to come short of the weed, coming shorter, and there was just nothing. There was and then I was 30 yards short of it, but and again, actually the clear area was closer to where the fish showed than where it turned into onion weed, and it was presentable.
But again, going back to the variables, if it's quite a big lake, not so well trodden, perhaps, or if it's a real busy lake, say.
It's a small lake, but it's not busy.
Where everyone fishes to that clear spot, then I want to avoid that like the plague.
Yeah, no, it's not that sort of
then
scenario.
It'd be on that little clay spot, wouldn't it? That's not done to death.
Yeah, I never caught anything, so I'm rubbish, obviously.
That eelgrass, actually, in that situation where because that stuff is really fine as well. You don't necessarily, you can be landing in that and pulling back and not even knowing that you're in it.
If it's shallow, this was deep. There was a huge weed bed that was probably 30-40 yards square that came off the corner of an island, and it was just, there was no drop anywhere. It went down through probably 4 or 5 feet of water, and then it was just nothing. And you just wind in a load of this eelgrass. It's got different types of it, like other weed. It grows through other weeds, so there was other bits in there as well.
Yeah, it's tough stuff. Where would you go? How would you guys approach fishing over eelgrass?
Chod rigs.
Chod rigs, or a solid PVA bag.
I've never really used them. Something I really like to get into.
Yeah, they're ag, man.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
solid
if you're a solid bag angler and it's pissing with rain, you're like, oh no, you've got to try and get them out there. And you miscut. That's the thing. I know people who are brilliant solid bag anglers. You know, like Steve French comes out to Gigantica with me. Has caught the big un on a solid bag, 87-pound common. He's had another one chunky that I'd dearly love to catch, 83-pound in the winter on a solid bag. He's a solid bag like through and through. That's all he does.
Yeah, I think they're
you
very
know.
underrated and very underused in big carp fishing.
They are
say.
underused, and that's one of the reasons he used it. He's I'm sure Steve won't mind me saying he's a stubborn old mule, and he won't fish with pop-ups at all.
Yeah.
He won't fish with wafters, right? That's cheating as far as he's concerned. He's the weed boat guy. He drives the weed boat and cuts the weed, and he just fishes a bottom bait straight out of the bag in every scenario.
Yeah.
He will never ever put a pop-up on. And because he got so bored with doing that, he started fishing solid bags because it was a different way to fish, and he could still fish on the bottom. And he's become a bit of a solid bag sort of master, if you like. He's really good at casting them at range and getting them accurate. But he's sort of like all that tying it, and then it doesn't land on that tree; it lands on that tree.
Oh yeah, that
I can't be having that, man. I just no way. Just too much.
You're just a little bit extra nervous as well casting those out. It's not quite
They
the same,
wander.
is it? It's like,
They wander in the air. You cast them out. I'm trying to get them as tight as I can. I can do it. Ali's taught me how to do it, and they're going out like a rig, and then they do that, and then they don't land. And you know, it's like a lot of people leave them, and there's no way that I would leave it. It's got to be where it's got to be. Do you know what I mean? And then you've run out of the pre-tied ones, and it's a bit drizzly, and then your coat's a bit wet, and it touches it, and it all falls out the bottom. And you just
but there are scenarios with that. I mean, especially if people aren't using those. On Tom Stokes was talking about Burfield actually, and how people are not really using that kind of method on there.
There's two major benefits that spring to mind. I mean, like we've spoke a lot about pop-ups, you know, and like if you're fishing for pressured fish, from what I've seen, like I want to fish a bottom, but I guess we really should say that. Like, you know, where the Chod is brilliant is presenting a rig where we can't present a rig.
Absolutely.
Yeah? But if we've got
but you could put a solid bag there, couldn't you?
This is where I was going with your friend. Like, you know, where he's like.
He's not my friend. I'll just go fishing.
Acquaintance. You know, he's like. I mean, I would almost certainly he's using a relatively short hook, a short hook length. Most people
4.5 inches.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
He's presenting a bottom bait, the most natural way we can present a bait. So like he's ticking, you know, lots of boxes here. So yeah, it's a pain. I don't do a lot of it. You know, I have used little cobweb bags quite a lot in the past, and that's been quite
They're
successful.
called funnel web, mate. Funnel
yes,
web,
yeah.
Another little put them on.
But they look really neat. You know, I remember like, you know, doing things like, you know, I was fishing a tiger cutting off back to back, and then I had just one other tiger in that bag cutting off, like on a tricky little.
I think again the PVA mesh bags. Yeah, they're a very underused thing. I've caught
they are nowadays.
Yeah,
they are definitely.
They've gone out of fashion.
I guess that's the word, isn't it?
They've gone out of fashion, definitely.
But do you see a different scenario for both of those rigs as well? I mean, a solid bag. I never used to go fishing without solid PVA bags. I could not fish without using solid bags at one point. And actually, Bailey.
You've grown up at Horseshoe though, haven't you? And they pretty much were invented there.
Mental. You used to go in the summer bay there, and if there were a few fish in there, they would be taking those solid bags on the drop. The rod would be going out your hand, and it'd be like you put like 50 kilos of bait out there. You'd think that there was so much, and they're just seeing those bags and just bang.
Yeah. They're very conditioned into it, though, aren't they? Everybody's doing it. Everyone's using small pellets and hemp and that sort of thing, and corn.
Well, Bailey at Norton Disney, he was in the swim that you moved into, and we were seeing those fish showing. He just he put some oil in the trout pellet, put that out, and within a few minutes you could see it bleeding off, and it went within 15 minutes.
There was about 1 million fish in that quadrant of the lake, though, wasn't there? And that's not an exaggeration. Sorry, pals, but there was.
He was talking about Grenville as well, actually, on our last podcast, and baiting up an area with boilies, and then fishing a solid bag over the back of it, something completely different over the back
so
of
your
it.
boilies
And,
are the chum.
yes.
They're getting the fish to come into the area, and then you've got something past it that is super attractive. Yeah, I mean, mate, he's a smooth operator of bows, isn't he? Do you know what I mean? He don't miss a trick. So, you know, anything that he does is a good tactic.
You don't use them?
Not a lot of solid bags, no. But
Yeah.
I can see the benefits though, and just as Luke said, you know, even though they're not used in sort of, I guess, big fish fishing that often, I do know of a couple of chaps who do it, and yeah, I know there's
I've done it for big
apart
fish fishing.
from the pain in the arse aspect that
Yeah.
you're alluding to, which I'm not going to lie, that doesn't appeal, but I do. Yeah, I can totally.
If,
I mean,
if the range is right and the conditions are right, you know, I've used it on places where I doubt if any of the members have ever used it.
Yeah.
And caught a really lovely big un on it the first time I used it, and it was part of my game plan when I went back there to use it again. And the lake changed, and the fish weren't in the areas they were in before, and I didn't go back to it. But it's definitely, you know, I moan about it, but it's something that I will go to, you know, if the situation, because again, like you say, tiny little short hook link.
We've got one there actually. I mean, that's
braided
Rob
hook
Burgess's rig there. I mean, look at that.
Yeah.
You got
That's a
loads
dainty
and loads of
little
attraction
rig,
all
yeah.
condensed down into
Yeah.
one, like, you know,
Yeah.
one like a spot almost,
Yeah, it's
isn't
like
it?
a mouthful,
And
isn't it?
everything's so
Yeah.
concealed. It's just.
Yeah,
But
and it's,
compared
I think
to-
it's you can put mega attractive stuff in the bag. The hook link's very, very short. You can use a massive hook with a little tiny bait,
Yeah, you know
providing
your
the bait's
percentage.
balanced. I think braided hook links, I think, give you the best hook holds. You know, better than stiff rigs. I think every time on a braided hook link, it's just there, isn't it? You know,
They don't feel that
And,
that stiffer stuff in their lips.
I
do
just,
they?
I
don't
just think the braid allows the hook to turn that much better, and sort of it ends up over the contours of the mouth better. The stiff hook link can be
Yeah.
anywhere in their mouth
Yeah.
and catching. And if you hook them on a solid bag rig, it's like, I'm getting this in. There's no like question about it. I am landing this carp, you know. And
I think
you know,
there's an awful lot to be said about, you know, the traditional braided hook lengths.
Definitely,
and
mate.
the reason, half the reason why we don't use them like we used to is just because of tangling. I know there's
Yes.
plenty of things that you can do to alleviate it, but like this year again with the pole fishing and dropping it, been using heavy ledge, short braided hook lengths, and again the presentation, second to none. And another thing, I thought I'd be interested what people think, but when I'm doing that, and I said to, you know, as alluding, I use a bit of foam, like. I know sometimes people like talk about like the separation, you know, in this situation, I'm using a short hook length, so I don't want separation. I'm happy if it's.
you want it coiled up so that it actually
Yes,
shoots back in the mouth,
Because when
don't
I've
you?
got, you know, I'm going really short. I don't know exactly what direction that carp's coming in from, and I want to give it a little bit of rope, you know, to make sure I get the chance to.
I think
hook
that's
him.
anottle thing with the solid bags. It's all coiled up
Yeah,
inside
same
it,
scenario.
isn't it?
It's
You know?
I think
perfect.
people can be too obsessed with have hook link. It's all you ever hear is laying the hook link out straight, and I
prefer
really
the
don't.
opposite.
I really don't.
Yeah.
Like when mine go down, they sort of go down in a bit of a bend, almost like that.
Yes, you've got a bit of movement.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, what's the point in using a long rig if
Do you-
it's straight?
Do you think the bait's going into the fish's mouth quite easily, and you're hooking them because you've got a sharpened hook on, and it's so sharp that then they've pricked themselves? They're now in a state of panic.
I
And
think
boom,
they've just
they're
got
off. Do you
they've
think-
just got more movement before. I think that hook goes further back into the mouth before they're feeling the lead. I think with
Yeah.
a real short hook link, that hook can only be in its front lip, can't it? It can't take it right back because there's
Yes.
not enough rope there.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Look at barbel fishing, for example. They're using whacking long hook links. They have to length.
But that's a completely different
Well, it is, but I
scenario,
think
isn't
we
it?
can
You've
take-
got
we
tight
can
line going down to the lead because they're river fishing.
Yeah, maybe.
You're trying to that hook link, and also if they're chucking bait in, some of it's disappearing down further away from where they're fishing, and that's their longer hook link
Yes.
is there to suit
to
that
mimic
scenario.
that. Yeah, no, okay,
you know?
yeah, I'm with you. But
You know,
I do think lengthening. I think it can
but
be
you
a
know,
real
you
good
catch
thing,
you catch
know.
a lot of big uns, a lot of pressured fish, special fish, and your hinge is that. So we've got what the hook links.
It's
I don't know, 14, 15
12
inches.
to 14, yeah. Yeah, it's longer than 12, isn't it? It's probably
That's-
13
yeah,
or 14.
that's-
So we got a reverse hinge on there at the moment, haven't we? With a coated.
But
Yeah.
it's lots of
Coated
reasons. I
hook
know
link.
I'm presented, even if, you know, I am in a bit of shit.
It is a thing of beauty. I mean,
but
looks
I'm
nice.
also
you have to start tying it on Wednesday if you're doing Friday night, don't you?
yes, I need a couple of spalls a weekend.
Do you have loads? Do you have loads of these tied up?
No, time as I go.
Right.
I'm exactly the same. I've never had a rig full
even
of rigs.
if I've got one there, I just have to tie a fresh one. You know what I mean?
Right.
Generally speaking, but the beauty of a long rig as well is you can see like that separation because I don't use foam and I use a supple hook link.
Yeah.
Relatively supple hook link. You see that double splash when it goes in, and sometimes you just know. Oh, that's,
Yeah. And have you looked much of how that comes to rest?
Yeah, it sort of almost coils round, not straight, but not completely round. It's all about how much putter you use, how balanced the bait is, isn't it?
Yeah.
To how straight it is. Obviously, I'd steam it straighter than what that is.
The less putty, the slower it sinks, the more it's outstretched.
Yeah, that's it. And where you put the putty halfway up the hook link, if it's nearer to the lead, you get that.
It pushes away more, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not looking for it to be. I'd be using a different material if I wanted it completely straight. You know.
Yeah. So different to what I do.
Maybe that plays in it though, Dan. You know, like where. You know, I have used hook links as long as that, but don't now. Like, do you know what I mean? So there's a difference, isn't it? Like, when we get, even if we're on the same lake, you know that being different sometimes, as well as getting everything else right, is going to play for you, isn't it? That's where it's. Yeah, that's where it's interesting, isn't it?
I'm stuck in my ways. If something's going and it's working,
you don't want to change it.
Until it's evidently I need to change.
Yeah,
which was probably about 2 or 3 weeks back. But I am stuck in my ways. I know what works for me.
Is it only boilies that you're feeding when you're fishing like that,
no.
or you put would you put maggot out? Would you put crumb out?
No, I wouldn't fish maggot. I wouldn't really fish crumb. I'd fish broken bait.
Broken boilies and whole ones.
Broken bait and nuts.
Right.
Bigger bits, but not just whole.
And how are you applying them? Are you spomming them? Are you catapulting them?
I'll spom them if it's too far to catapult.
And when you're spomming, medium spom or a big one?
Medium, I suppose.
And
medium,
are you spreading it out?
A little bit, but I'm fishing over sort of deep water, so I know it's not just going in one little clump. But even so,
I
suppose it does. I'm more than happy.
Even on a big pit though, Dan, with wind.
The only water movement is in the first 12 inches. So we film this a lot. It does that, and it just does that, and it doesn't balloon out. It ends up whatever shape it's in when it gets out of that very, very top bit.
Even with lots of different weights and sizes,
it just falls straight like that. It doesn't go out like we think it does. It just falls straight. We've done loads of it on the underwater films. We've done from a remote boat and all that sort of thing as well. And you just end up with it spreads a little tiny bit. It doesn't. It's not the size of the spom. It spreads a little tiny bit, but it's not
the dispersion.
It's not dispersed right. The fish do that, and I've noticed it in my tank. I've got fish up to 12 pound in my tank in the back garden, 4 metre long tank. They're all sort of probably 6 to 12 pound, and they move the bait around. You know, just by swimming and also picking it up and gobbing it back out somewhere else, and then another one will eat the bait that they've gobbed out. So I just drop it because I'm just feeding the fish. I'm not fishing for them. So I just drop it in, and I feed them boilie crumb most of the time because they get all my bait that I haven't used. That's on the turn. All they eat is gone off bait. My fish. They're not very well catered for. And I crumb the boilie up in a crusher, and I chuck it in, and that there's a little bit of that, you know, and there is movement of water in the tank. But within 10 minutes, it's spread over half the tank, just through movement.
In a feeding scenario, I'm sure they come in and move it about.
Bear in mind the bottom's glass, so it's flat as you like. There's no gravel in there or anything, so it's not going to move as much in weed or gravel because it's going to find its way in between all them little crevices, isn't it? You know, but I think they move it around for us more than we actually know.
Yeah.
So when you're spomming, with this rig out there, do you clip up at different ranges and spom at different ranges, or all the same?
No, but I'll move the tip there. But I'm not looking.
Right, so you are right. Okay,
yeah,
so you are changing the position of where it hits the water.
Yeah, but I'm relatively
so you're trying
tight.
To spread it.
I'll be honest, I'm relatively tight, but I'll never use that over a real clean clean spot, I'll use it over sort of where you get a bit of a drop, but it locks up a bit, that sort of thing.
So silty or weedy?
It's a bit of both, yeah.
Bit of both.
Either.
Right.
Yeah.
And will you have that on all 3 rods if that's how you're gonna fish? Is that it?
Yeah.
You won't have a bottom bait on one of the rods.
Only if it's like if I'm not getting any crap back on my hook whatsoever, and your
Right.
teeth shudder and
Yeah,
fall
yeah,
out
yeah,
as
yeah.
it hits. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
If you're getting that real clean, smooth,
Right.
I'll use a bottom bait. But
And
I'm looking.
Have you fished against anglers that have been fishing much shorter rigs and out caught them?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say.
Like people you respect, good anglers.
Not enough to draw a conclusion. Not
Right.
really. All
we
I
need
know
to
is
we
that-
need to do a year together somewhere,
Yeah,
don't
it'd
we?
be interesting, wouldn't it? It would
Good.
be interesting.
We go up the calf a lot, I know
Yeah,
Well, I'm always learning. I'm always open.
you know, I'm
to
not
it
saying I'd
and-
always use, but at the moment,
Yeah.
I am. I'm in a bit of a.
And are you chucking this a long way, 100 yards plus, or not?
No, I can't cast that far. No, the lakes I've been fishing this year, it's all been relatively short, sort of up to 50 and 60 yards.
Yeah, that's lovely, that, isn't it?
Yes, nice bit of fishing.
You asked that because of tangles, Dan?
I asked it because of tangles, yeah, definitely. And like up my eyes now, I can't see it. Sorry, I didn't mean to disrespect your rig by dropping it so frivolously.
No.
I can't see the rig in the air, mate. It leaves the tip of the rod at such speed. If you're going out 120, whatever,
Oh yeah, I'm sure I wouldn't be able to.
you know, I
to
can't.
then.
I cannot see whether it's all separate. So I'm trying to cast something out that I'm almost certain is not going to tangle. But like talking about hinges, so I know. Have you got a hinge over there as well? Yeah. So is that going on Leadcore or is that going on a
When
lead
I
clip?
was last using that was when I was fishing Halton in a quite a weedy area.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a spot where like we talked about before. Like it wasn't like I was just I had weed between me and the spot I was fishing. So that was on a helicopter setup.
Helicopter
Yeah,
set up with
yeah.
a bead set up away.
Not mega far back, but but it was probably like 6 inches or so.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, like I didn't.
And you're getting a nice drop in that situation.
No, I wasn't. It was kind of like over time, because I caught a fair few fish from this area. It got better.
Yeah.
They were definitely.
But you caught them
clearing
from
it.
the off.
Yeah, and
on that setup, so
yeah.
it wasn't clean to begin
No,
with.
I mean I was actually fishing up to a bank of ribbon weed, from the top to the bottom. I think that I seem to remember the spot was around about sort of 9-10 foot, and I was really judging because I was getting very soft. You know, when it's landing, it's very soft. So I envisaged it was landing in a little bit of weed, but I could tell by how far it was travelling that this was low lying. You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
travelling, but nothing like a donk. Do you know what I mean? We're talking.
Yeah.
It was, and on the times when I didn't get a take, you know, you've reeled it in, you're bringing in a bit of weed.
And this is almost a carbon copy of your naked Chod setup.
Yeah, and that's totally deliberate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I really I think that the way how the hook sits, and I've seen some people, and it doesn't mean like I'm right on this, but I've seen some people with a more aggressive curve. I don't want it to.
Yeah, well, the hook's
yeah,
right over.
Yeah, I'm not really buying it. That's almost like when you start really closing the gape of a hook. Like, my opinion, I think you're starting to make it harder to hook something.
Yeah.
So I don't. That's about as much as a curve that I'll steam it to that, and I'm happy with it. But yeah, it deliberately it's the same length. I think it's normally about like an inch and a quarter, like the length of the stiff
of the stiff
yeah,
material.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we just get into reducing the gape of the hook a little bit as well? So like with
Can I not talk about my hinge stiff rig before we move on?
if you want to, Dan.
Just because it's so different.
Okay.
From, see, I haven't used a soft material as a boom, like you guys have for ages. When your rig pretty much there is what I cast out on Elliot's behalf at the end of the underwater part 8.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And it tangled so many times before we got it. This whatever it was, 50-yard cast, something like that. It was up the Leadcore again. I'm just winding in, going. And I had a 2-ounce lead on, and it said, "I want a 2-ounce lead." I'm like, like it just won't go straight, mate. It won't land on a sixpence. We all think we're fishing accurate, but with the underwater, you're fishing accurate. I mean, you really, you have got to drop it in a 2 foot square, and it wasn't right. And in the end, we got it out there, and obviously it sat out there, and every fish swam up to it and veered off of it, including the one that we caught. And then in the end, one took it, and it happened to be the big common. It was £40, and Elbow was like, "I'm a hero. Hinged stiffs only catch big uns." Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, well, fair play, mate. If we didn't know all that was going on down there was going on, then we would have just sat there oblivious, and it would have roared off in the end, and it would have been the £40 common. So you can sort of see why that happened.
But on the tangling, Dan, like, look, don't get me wrong. Like, if I wanted to fish a hinge stiff, and I didn't want, zero chance of tangle, so I'm gonna have a stiff boom and a stiff, and it's superb. You can have it landing all don't bother holding it down.
There's a massive chance of that tangling. Don't get me wrong. But
that's
I
what
will know
but,
when that goes in, whether
but
it has or even if it might have done.
What about in the dark? If you're recasting in the dark, then can you tell by the way it's dropping through the water whether it's tangled or not?
I know how well it goes out and hits the clip, and you just get an idea. No, you don't know. You'll never know.
Is Luke's, he's like boom section. Is it much softer, Dan? Because that doesn't tangle like that. Or is it?
What's that? What material is that?
End trap soft.
Right. And that's camo, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a bit thicker in diameter, I would say.
Because that.
See, I use hybrid stiff, so look, mine's reasonably stiff, and that's a small hook as well. Actually, that's back.
It's an 8, isn't it?
Sorry, back when I was using it, on that big estate lake I fish over in the west of England. That's how I was.
We know what that is, don't we?
The one you take me on a guesty to.
Mate, if you want to come on a guesty there, you can come on a guesty there, mate. I happily take you there. No, we're not going to catch anything. It doesn't do a bite from like December till whenever. It's done a couple of January.
March does a few, doesn't it? Again.
You're not coming in March. Well, guests can't go in March anyway.
Right.
But I'm not sharing
April.
March with you, bruv. I'm not sharing March. And April is just like, but they're mega carp, but a lot of it is 100 yards plus, and up the side of the islands it's 30, 31, 32, 33, 34 wraps up to 37, 38. I can't fish at that range effectively, so I don't fish that swim. But that's what I was casting, sort of 30 to 33, and I loved little hooks, and I was a big hook man still at that point, and I loved little hooks, and I think a hinge stiff rig is probably the most secure rig you can cast out for hook to landing ratio. I cannot remember losing one on a hinge stiff. I had a real big mirror there once that utterly beasted me, and I followed Mike Wilmot into the swim, right? And Mike's a bit of a smooth criminal. He nothing gets past him, and he's fully aware of what's going on. And I get there at first light, I do my laps. Didn't see anything. Had a cup of tea, one of the boys. Back into Mike's swim. I'd already had a cup of tea with him, and then 10 o'clock in the morning, like showings over. One showed in his swim, £20 common, right? So I went, that's good enough for me. And he's like, oh right. I was like, what? He said, oh well, I suppose you don't want me to go out in the boat then. I'm like, no. So I can't look at my spots. I'm like, no. And he's like, right, okay, all right. He loved having an inspection and seeing if he'd been cleaned out and all that sort of thing, So I went in the swim. I said, mate, it's all right, I'll only ring you if it's a big one. And the next morning, I had one of the big ones on that rig. And it was ridiculous, the fight. It's quite a sort of confined swim. And just like it was, I think I'd backleaded, and
do you know what, I need the lure a minute. You carry on, guys.
I think I'd backleaded, and it went underneath the lines inside between the backleads and the bank, and I'm like this, and it's like under there, and it's not light yet, and I know it's a monster. When I got it in, that was just like. Every one on a hinge stiff is there, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why
every single one.
I love them so much. You just, know when you hook one. Generally speaking, touch wood, they're coming in, aren't they? Yeah.
I would fish them more if I could find a way of quick changing them. You know, that's all of my rigs nowadays. Spinners, Ronnies, whatever you want to call it, quick change, the little loop to looping on, quick change. Everything's done in seconds, and I've become lazy in my sort of extended years. You know, and it's like if you compare that what I'm using now, which looks brutal. Size 4 hook, prototype hook, longish shank, curve point. Compare that to where's the hinge stiff there. You know, they're not a dissimilar distance off the lake bed, are they?
No.
Both are curved because you've got a curved shank on that hook. So it's behaving in a similar,
for sure,
not exactly the same, but a similar way. And all of that stuff remains, and I'm just taking the hook off. A lot of the time with that rig, I'm making the hook barbless when I've got the fish out the hook out of the mouth, making the thing barbless, taking the hook bead off because I'm so tight. I'm reusing the hook bead on the next hook. I'm using the same bait because it hasn't, nothing's happened to it, hasn't pulled through or anything else. And all I've used is the hook and the little kicker on the bottom of it, and another one's gone back on baits, but boom, it's out again. And the more you use rigs like that.
There's a lot to
you
be said
become
for that.
lazy. You want to fast track everything. You know.
I had not really used like the quick release type swivels at all. I suppose. Strange thing to
was
say.
it for noddies, Aaron? Is that what it was? Was it come on, mate? Was it for noddies?
I'm a noddy now. I thought I don't know. I looked at it a little bit sort of match style carp fishing, if I'm honest, and you know I weren't catching enough to really worry about how quick I was changing the rig.
Yeah.
But last year I had a good year when you were doing quite a bit of range fishing, and the ability to be able to land the carp, and you know that moment when they're like knackered and in there, could just put your hand down there, slide the hook length off, and you know the rig's out the way. It's a real benefit, and you know it just speeds everything up, just makes you a bit more efficient.
Where's my is that my no? That's the old rig safe, I think. No, that's look. So you two don't have them tied.
Wow.
That is my rig safe, and Tobe, you're not having this tomorrow to film.
Are you sure?
All right, I'm going to masterclass in Germany next week. There is no way. But I had 2 of these like this, and basically I've gone over to everything is loop onto a quick change swivel. So I've like halved the number of rigs I've got, because I'll use the same combi rig on a helicopter rig in some soft stuff as I will on a lead clip on lovely clean firm bottom. I'll use exactly the same hook link on both lead systems, and they've both got a quick change swivel incorporated in them. So I've only got one set of rigs that work on both. You know, I mean, I don't fish very, very stiff boom hook links short with pop-ups on lead clips. I don't want it all that restrictive and that close together.
Up the leader,
you want the movement up the leader, and I think that with the Leadcore, you know, and helicopter rigs, you know that hook link's always presented, don't you? It's always lying nice on the bottom, you know. That's why I've gone over to because it's half the number of hook links that I keep with me. I can't see myself ever going back. It's like the distance sticks. I didn't use them for years, and I watched Jake Wildboar, and I'm like, I counted the turns. I had the number of turns for every single spot all written down.
Oh, wow.
You know, and then the first time I used them, I'm like, what a prick I am.
What a game changer.
I was
I
pretty
resisted
late.
that
I was pretty
for
late to
years,
it. I remember
you
going to Abbey Lakes and like just going past every swim, like, you know, wherever I've been, I don't know, wherever I was fishing, it was backwards because nobody had them, and then going there, like everybody was on it. But I used to walk out, like
I did.
But you know, I remember like some of the lakes, you know, some of the bailiffs, like, you know, you were walking out too far, you chance, look, it helps without a doubt. It all makes it more efficient, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
I think that the longer you do it for, the less open you are to new things, new developments.
Yeah, maybe.
Can't teach an old dog new tricks. That's what they say, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
What about braided hook links then?
I'm going to use the lure as well.
We're going to take it in turns.
Yeah,
aren't
I
we?
think we are.
You use braided hook links straight through, Aaron?
You know, like back in the day, well, there wasn't any coated hook lengths. So so if you weren't using mono, you were using some form of braid straight the way through. But it's like we kind of touched on this a little bit, didn't we? That you have got the problem with tangles. Like you do need a stringer on or something like that. But recently, edge fishing, like I really like it. I think it's a brilliant presentation. So yes, I definitely do it, especially if I'm either lowering it, or we talked about earlier, like dropping the rig by a pole or something like that. I'm not sure you can beat it. Because we're talking about like a really subtle material, and that really think is. Do
you think we're worrying ourselves too much with tangles? Because this rig that I've got here, Dan would literally have a fit if he saw this rig. I fished this rig at 140 yards, and I don't get tangles with it. It just
use it the sleeve helps, doesn't it?
That sleeve makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And for me, it's no one else fishes braid anyway nowadays, do they? So it's you're doing something that's completely different to everyone else. But I think we worry ourselves too much with tangles. I think, like I say, you put a sleeve on here, and.
But I think, look, it depends what the hook bait is. And what I was about to say, like I remember back in the day when we were casting braided hook lengths more. Like if you had a larger boilie, then the tangles are alleviated. Like that kind of weight, without a doubt. You start trying to use a 12mm or something like that, and then you would get more tangles. But I'm surprised but maybe like the way maybe
the old thriller rig.
Oh, is that the thriller rig?
The way we trapping it now, like stuff like that.
Like you say, we're hitting the clip, aren't we, and letting everything kind of. But do you not think that we're kind of restricting ourselves? We are trying. We're all telling each other to fish the same way, and we're listening to like us guys talking here, and people are being convinced that
No, I wouldn't try and convince anyone of anything. It's each their own.
But people can be quite easily influenced by what we're talking about. Especially we're going more away from this now and more onto kind of scaffoldy type rigs.
Then I'm all for going against the grain, and I think that's a great presentation. But if it's tangled in a tangled mess, it's no good, is it? But if you can get that out, then absolutely. And anyway, you have a few casts. If that's not tangling, you know straight away, don't you?
They don't tangle. If it doesn't tangle, I've had more problems with tangles around the Heli-safes. Using this with a Heli-safe, I got tangles.
Yeah, I think I get less tangles if I'm fishing at range and the bottom allows. I'll use lead clip with a sleeve like that, and I don't get tangles. Not even with that end trap softer material.
Yeah, I tend to do the same. Like last year, I was fishing at range, and I was using lead clips.
Yeah.
And I also kind of think, like with a heli, then, like imagine you just start pushing the bead up, and it depends the topography of the bottom, but I'm worried about having to fish tight lines and at range. Like I start potentially lifting the Leadcore up, whereas if I'm using a lead clip, I'm not so worried about that. Because
Simon, your mum's here. She said, "Are you going to be long?"
Probably another 2 hours at this rate, aren't we? No, we were just talking about using braid, Dan, and I use quite a long length of braid right through. You'd have a fit looking at this rig. And
what's the name of it inside? Just so we.
So you're using a long length of braid and no tubing.
No, I do use tubing on the end there. Yes, I'm using tungsten tubing on the end.
Where is it?
Yeah, 12. So about 12.
Set of kahunas you got there casting that out.
Yeah, and that changed my fishing. To be honest, my second season on the lake, but changing to that presentation changed everything. But what happened before actually?
But you could achieve exactly that with a spinner rig or a Ronnie rig. You could achieve the hook that level off the bottom, the angle of the point that way. You could achieve all of that with a braided hook link if you wanted to. But all of that gubbins there could be recreated easily with a spinner rig, and you can change it in seconds.
Yeah, well, you can change that in seconds. That's quick to change.
But isn't that
so? That's a multi-rig you got on there.
Yeah, isn't that shrink tube though?
Yeah, I wouldn't normally use shrink tube either. I was just doing that for the purpose.
Are you trying to deceive us then, Simon?
Not really. Not intentionally.
Everyone's
See, that's what I'm really good. I'm good at deceiving people without even trying. But I mean,
this is a Save thing, is it? Like you only give us half the.
But no, I mean, like so I don't get tangles with that rig. Like I say, what we got on there is a multi-rig, and I was the reason I wanted to talk about the gape of the hooks. The first season I was using a size 6 curved with a bit of shrink tubing on the end, like people do. The only fish I caught that year was a tench, and everyone comes up to you and, wow, you caught a tench, that's harder than catching a carp. And you look at the rig and you think, I think that rig is more suited to hooking fish with small mouths rather than necessarily trying to hook a carp. And I wanted to use a long shank hook, but we can't use long shank hooks on there. So what I'd done there was use the stiffest material possible.
Is this Savay?
Yeah.
Right.
Stiffest material possible. Create a loop which would give you a bit of a long shank, and then use a straight.
So what have you got under here then? What material is that's causing you D?
That's dark matter on there at the moment. I was using Fox camo stiff before that. So a stiff coated braid, effectively. A stiff coated braid, yeah.
And what is that? How are the two joined? There.
So I uncoat it. So I pull the coating back. So
is that the coating of that braid on the inside?
That's the coating, yeah.
Oh right,
yeah.
Okay, got you. It's not a different kind of braid.
No,
right.
No. So it's all the same. It's all the same material, but
another quite a long hook link as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd adjust that hook link to if I was sure that I was fishing over a cleaner bottom, but I would usually use a 10-inch hook link with that. Right. And
is this one of your hook baits?
No. Like the rest of us.
Sorry,
is it even one of his rigs?
Am I missing something? Did I not say bring in your rigs with hook baits on in advance of this podcast?
Possibly.
I didn't know what I had to add to this, Dan, to be honest. So, but I thought.
No, you did. I specifically, Simon. I said.
I thought we got.
And you went, what, me as?
Part.
You said to
Not
me,
quite.
what, me as well? And I went, yes, Simon, you as well. I'd like to see what you're using. I think you never stop learning. And I'd like to see what you catch the Savay fish on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it's somebody else's pop up and.
No, but the rig is.
The rig is the same.
Yeah, and the hook as well is different as well. Actually, I use a. I needed to.
Do you know what we're going to call this rig? The P45 rig. Yeah. What do you have it on? I had it on a P45. Oh, did you? Right, yeah, I heard about that in that podcast.
I hope it was a big one.
That last one that Simon ever did. Do you remember? That was really good, that rig one. I wish he'd done more then.
So it's been a good run.
Hasn't it? Yeah, 31
well, I've really enjoyed
podcasts.
it, mate.
We've done well, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thriller rig, actually, Dan. That's what we call that one. That's
what?
what the guys on the lake, they called it the thriller rig.
Thriller rig.
Yeah.
Now
Because
They'll be laughing their socks off when they listen to this.
why is it called the Thriller rig?
The story's too long. I can't get into it. But
Does it involve Michael Jackson?
It does.
Does it?
It's a long
Really?
story. And I got a little bit cocky with it because I was catching a few fish on it as well. So you start giving the rig elaborate names as well. But
What, did you come up with it?
yeah, of course I did.
And they named it the Thriller rig. Or
When they come
Simon, you've got to tell us the story now, mate. Come on.
No, honestly, the story's not as good as the name itself. But
Right.
But every time they come in the stream, they go, yeah, you got the thriller rigs on again, so yeah.
Right. Okay.
But
So what hook do you use it with?
a Solo 101.
That was me thinking it was going to be one of ours, but you just picked up the wrong pattern and you've just put it on there.
Yeah, but this was pre-Korda, right? This was pre-Korda for a start,
okay.
and I needed to. And this is something that we don't do. We don't do a straight eye, and we don't do a straight pointed hook. If we did, I would be using it.
Right.
So Damo a few years ago, because I said I wouldn't mind using a different hook
Sorry,
pattern.
I think you're in a hole. You
It's getting a bit hot in here.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. But no, I was just talking about thinking that we need to use stiff materials, and that's not. And I mean, it looks like that shouldn't go out without being tangled. But I've had no problems with tangles with that rig whatsoever. Yeah. And landed every fish that I hooked on it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And that's you were talking about when we spoke on the phone about having a pop up close to the deck.
actually, it lies a
but
little
not-
bit lower than that. Actually, it does. It sits lower than that, and I don't use it.
What do you mean it sits lower than that?
More like that. Yeah.
It sits like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's
For a period. Does it go in the water like that?
it goes in the water a little bit higher. Like so To
so
be
do
honest,
you take into account the bait's going to take water on and that it will end up how you want it, or because some people do that,
no,
don't they?
I do it low lying, so further forward than that. And to be honest, if it sits flat, I'm not bothered whether it's slightly off the bottom or sitting flat on the bottom.
So if it ends up doing that and ends up with the point of the hook touching the lake bed like that, you don't mind.
It doesn't sit quite like that, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Bear in mind, this is your last opportunity to ever talk about rigs on a podcast. I'd give us I'd give us a bit more detail, Simon. To be honest,
I think I've exposed my rigs for long enough.
Aaron
Dan,
says,
actually.
I think you've dug a big enough hole.
Either that, or
right, let's move on. Then. Anyway, what are we talking about now?
Perhaps he's played a master stroke. I don't know.
Maybe.
Again, I seem to accidentally get myself into good situations.
Yeah.
Well, apart from now, maybe.
But it does appear that everybody other than me tends to use longer, softer hook links.
Right.
Certainly, everybody around the table. Would you say you not use so much, Aaron?
Not that length. I think their longest are 7-ish inches.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're longer than I would. Not haven't used in the past, but do at the moment.
Yeah.
Like I guess I would. Look, there's no rules to any of this, like so we know, like it's not like there's something definitive, but some of the stuff that I've seen in the recent past, I kind of think like the more rope I'm giving them, the more chance that it's going to get ejected. Like so, we're kind of the premise. My premise is a small amount of movement.
Yes.
Like I'm getting it, and I'm just mean a fraction. So if I can present the bait with a shorter rig, then I will. So when it starts to get like that's because it isn't completely clear.
Yeah.
And that's like, somebody look at that and think really basic. But part of that is because I've caught a load of fish on mono hook lengths, and I really like it. But mono's got one massive disadvantage: it's the abrasion resistance.
Yeah.
Like I cast out a mono hook length once on Horton, because I started fishing out. And to be fair, there's not loads of... Well, there's a few gravel spots out there, but this was a clean gravel area, so a kind of known spot. But it wasn't like, sharp gravel. Like I envisioned it to be relatively... Yeah, got to take that night and got bloody cut off. So,
What mono? What sort of breaking strain? And was it a fluorocarbon?
No, it
or
wasn't.
Just a normal...
That was... my kind of go-to for mono hook length was always Berkeley Extra Tough in various different...
That's mad. That's what I used to use.
Yeah,
£10 Berkeley XT.
Yeah, £10 was a go-to.
£10 Berkeley XT, yeah.
I think
Size 8
actually
hooks.
think in this was a little bit higher than that, but I don't know if it mattered really. It was more like, obviously it's touch something sharp. So but I guess what and why I like sometimes using a completely coated hook length is I prefer like the separation between the bait and the hook. Like I know I'm not saying when we talk about a chod, Christ, the boilie's incredibly close to the hook. But I remember as being a kid and I was fishing a park lake. And I was catching these carp, and back then we're using braided hook lengths, heat shrink liner, and I think I was even using a suppler hair. And because you're doing that in casting, it had to be touching the bend of the hair or it would just tangle. And I remember years later, actually on the estate lake we both fished, I was relaying the story how I was hooking these carp and they were all like kind of on the outside of the lip. And it was really weird. And he goes to me, I bet you were using really short hairs. And I goes, yeah, I was. And he goes, yeah, if you'd lengthened the hair. And it was like, this was an experienced angler. Like there's some things, someone's going to say something, and like that was born of experience. And yeah, and that was quite a while back, that conversation. It was like 04, and it really stuck with me. And then I thought about like when I'd been using mono hook lengths, the hairs tended to be longer.
Yes, because they were less flexible, though. Is that why?
Yeah. I guess it wasn't even like back then. I guess totally thinking about it, if you know what I mean. It was just like you could have a separation, because it wasn't going to tangle. And now I think there's something in having a longer hair. On
the right materials, in the right combination.
Yeah, I mean, like this rig here was the rig I was belting out, and like sometimes we were getting 60-mile-an-hour winds last winter. The whole idea that the first cast was going where I want it. I'll do the jokes, but sometimes I'm taking 8 casts to get it where I want.
Yeah.
And then the one that lands, because it was like 17 foot, in one of the swims I was fishing, then I'll hold it down. So in that scenario, a rig that, and again, in that scenario, like I've been applying bait, they're on the bait. The hook's really sharp. I zero tangles.
This in the winter?
In the winter, yeah. But I did
applying fish. How much bait?
No. I never. I was doing 2 nights a week on there. They had a 48-hour rule, but that's what I do anyway. But I learned a few years back, because I was never a baiter, even though I know it works. But for most of my fishing, I was generally doing Saturday nights and Friday nights if I could push it. And I'm not getting a violin out, but you're at a lake at the worst time. You're not getting to pick the swims that you want. You're kind of slotting in. And I never thought you could kind of get bait working for you in that scenario, but I was wrong. I later learned that even if you're applying bait while you're fishing and just regularly fishing at a lake, even 1 night a week, oh God, they can get on it. So I was wrong in that instance. So here, no, just like by applying that bait while you're fishing, no throwing it in even when I was leaving. I wasn't doing that, but just using it, and not crazy amounts, but I probably was, like I alluded to before, using more bait than I would have done in winters gone past, without a shadow of a doubt.
So how much?
Probably,
give us an
I
idea.
reckon I was going for about 2.5 kilo a trip.
In 2 nights?
Yeah, in 2 nights.
Just boiling?
Yes, but I was breaking that up. Like, I was spomming it out and...
fishing holes as well, or not? A lot of feeding hole boilies, or all broken?
No, all broken baits.
Right, okay.
So, it was in my mind, it was fluttering down. I mean, we've talked about not sweat. I'd like, Dan, when that was 60 mile an hour, the whole idea that...
Yeah, 60 mile an hour, maybe you've got the first few feet of water moving.
Yeah.
I'm talking about in a normal situation.
Yeah, even I'm exaggerating a bit now. Like, thankfully, I weren't having to cast in, City wasn't doing that all the time. But quite often, I was putting the rods out, because we had so many low pressure fronts coming through last winter. It was regularly, what it's like when you get any kind of expanse of water. If you've got a 25 mile an hour wind, it's a reasonable chop. But either way, answering the question, spodding out broken baits.
Is there a lot of fish in there, though?
It's definitely not a runs water at all, but it's not Save, totally.
So how many fish in how many acres then?
That lake is 28 acres. Oh, I don't know, Dan, exactly what the thing is, but I think you'd be talking about a guess. I'd say 150.
All right, okay.
So, but not somewhere
not
where
heavily, but a lot of them are big ones, obviously. So that changes the biomass, doesn't it?
Definitely, and also
they can eat more. That's what I mean. A bigger fish, it can eat more.
Yeah, and on the way the shape of that lake, the middle was 160. Now I won't get you anywhere near that. You're not allowed shock leaders. But the reason I'm mentioning that is that they had somewhere where they could go to get away from the pressure, and your eyes would tell you that. You'd always see them out there.
Yeah.
But they haven't got a tape measure. You set out your stall, and they would drift out. But in that kind of scenario, it was all about, like, I like that, with a fully coated hook length, it's behaving some of the attributes to the mono, and didn't have to worry about tangles. And I did have. I remember I remember putting my rods out of a westerly over my head, and they went out brilliantly. Like, for once all the spotting was landing. It's one of those things, I almost know what I'm doing sort of thing. They're out there brilliantly. And anyway, 24 hours, brilliant weather, nothing. But I was never going to move them, and we've talked about this before, because they went out so well. And
you weren't going to wind them in?
No,
you were leaving
not
them.
at all, because I didn't have to worry about nuisance fish. All 3 went down, went down nicely. The spotting was good, and in that instance, there was an awful lot of rain. Now, I've never done particularly well in torrential rain, but the rain eased off on the final morning. I got 2 takes.
Right.
So,
it was climatic. That's what was stopping you getting a bite. It was climatic conditions, not how you were fishing.
Or they drifted over me. Okay, but the reason I'm mentioning this is, with a rig like that, the only thing I had to think about was that I'd sharpened those hooks, and now they've been sitting out there for 2 nights, and you start to think about corrosion. Because I haven't been putting any, like, I just, I sharpen the hook and out they go. But clearly, I did enough, and I got the 2 bites. But if I had, even
don't you think they're still sharper than one out of the packet, even though they've been out there a couple of days and corroded?
Well,
they're still sharp enough.
I did 2 nights this week and blank, but the week before I had a bite after it had been out for 2 nights. So answering the question, yes, I think they're sharp enough.
On the same lake or different place?
Different lake. But
Right.
I have to accept that you are getting corrosion, and also, weirdly, different lakes. You know, I'm presuming it's something to do with the pH.
Oh,
the bottom.
definitely.
You're getting
I think it is
different
the
levels of
pH.
corrosion.
Definitely.
I think it is pH.
Acidity
Yeah.
in the water. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it can actually be pH, and this is only from experience, not scientifically, but pH in extremes, like they really used to corrode at Elstow, yet that's alkaline.
Okay.
And you would have thought that it would have been acidic waters which would have created the rusting effect. Yet it was terrible for it. Like, it wasn't even worth sharpening them at Elstow because they lost it so quick. You know, so that's a clay pit, so it's going to be alkaline.
How much time did you have with a hook out there before they started to?
Hours.
Really?
Yeah. I stopped using them. I just used captors. Straight out the packet. You know, because there's no coating on not the final coat of coating on the point. So there was coating on the point, but it didn't have that third layer on it. So they were that little bit sharper. And I love the captors. I'm gutted that we couldn't keep doing them. You know.
Looking at your rigs, you got bottom bait.
Can I see that one? That was the one, was it?
Yeah, that's
right.
And,
Now, if you don't mind me saying, there's got a little bit of a curl in it. Would you have steamed that absolutely dead straight or not?
Being really honestly, no, I wouldn't have steamed it. If it had been a new one and it's in the rig ball, then that's under some tension. Or if it had been in the rings of the eyes, it's going to be it wouldn't have gone out. But honestly,
and stiff hair as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Hair.
Yeah, but that's part of it. That's allowing me to use a longer hair, and when I'm whacking it at range, like, you know, I would not have had the confidence to leave those rods out there for 2 nights if I thought it was tangled.
Yeah, sure.
So I know, you know, people might look at that and think
this is camo again.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, again, I've never used. Well, I've used it in the much heavier breaking strains for snag fishing. You know,
it's very similar to another hook length I used to use, Suffix. Do you remember they used to do something like sheepskin? It's a very similar, similar thing. Yeah.
Camo skin, wasn't it?
I think they did.
Stealth,
You're right. They did different variations.
The one that you like the diameter of and the stiffness of and how it ties, and it's getting that one.
And there's another
one,
because if you know. And even with that, like, if the difference between like 15 and 20 is the 15, the coating, when you're tightening the knot down, you have to be careful because you could damage the coating, and if you've done that, then it's not going to be as stiff as I want to not get the tangles. I actually want it behave a little bit like mono. That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
But you know, when you're
do you always counterbalance your bottom baits like that?
No, that's not a bottom bait, buddy. That's why that's like that. That's a pop up.
You're just popping it up, right.
And in actual fact, like, so, you know, quite often I would be shaving, and that's not brilliant for range. If you start, you know, if I had to shave off a little bit of that pop up to get it to behave how I wanted it with that shot on there, then I'd make sure I did whatever to one side to the other. But that's still.
For casting, you're making it symmetrical.
Yeah, because
you don't want one side of it,
because it's going to start to cause it to, you know, not travel as true.
Yeah.
But ideally, like, you know, if it's round, it's better. Yeah, because you just you know, the much
more. Is that one sharpened or not?
I
don't think it is.
I don't know, Dan. I'd have to.
Don't know.
Have to feel it, mate.
But a size 4 wide gate.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
And on that lake, I definitely even though we've talked about like the benefits of big hooks, but you know, you're dealing with stretches of reed beds, and you know, carp are bastards when there's Norfolk reeds. Like, there's times when you have to absolutely, you know,
given the butt.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they're kiting anyway, but you're doing everything to get them on a shorter line as possible.
Have you done that thing of when they're kited and you're never going to win, just stopping and just slackening right off? Have you ever done that before?
I generally have been trying to get them to me, to be honest with you, but it didn't always work. And what was the real tricky bit about that lake was I don't think I'd ever fished anywhere with so many zebra mussels.
Yeah.
So for that reason, like, you know, tight line fishing all year. So that's why, like, you know, I didn't have that on a helicopter because, you know, I'm having a tight line, so I want to fish a lead clip. Because if I had it on a heli, I'd be worried about lifting up the just lifting up the Leadcore. Because
Right.
I mean tight, almost like you're fishing on, Cassian, tips up in the air and
Right.
And it's good. The fights
To
are
get
really
the line away from the muscles on the lake.
Yeah,
bed,
exactly.
So you're not going to nick something on the bite and end up
yeah,
just getting
yeah,
cut off on the bite.
And I mean, bite's really fun because it's a bit like old school, screwing up the thing, sticking them in the clip. And I'd normally on the levels, I'd get like when it's going, you get like the tension builds up, and it'll be a bleep, and you look at it and you know it's going, and then. But I did have the clutches loose because you didn't want the tension afterwards until you picked up the rod, because you don't want tension against the weed with the zebras in.
Right.
I mean, they're lethal. I mean,
Yeah.
it is.
But you're using a hybrid lead clip.
Yeah.
So you're dumping the lead. Guaranteed, you're dumping the lead every single time.
Later on in the winter, Dan, when the bulk of the bulk of the weed in that lake broke up in the autumn, and when you went when you went for later on in the winter, some of the fights I had, I was kept the lead was staying on, which was brilliant.
Right.
There wasn't any need for that. So yeah, there was a bit of weed around, but not enough that you needed to.
Were you getting them little scratches, little slits in the lead where the lead has run over the muscles?
No, not when
Right.
no, because of the area that I was getting the bites from. I was generally fishing silty areas. So the weed, I know this as a fact because when I brought in once, some weed, you could see the zebra mussels growing up the weed.
Yeah.
So Canadian pondweed, it's actually growing up it.
Yeah.
That's why there's so many losses on that lake, because obviously we know carp plough into Canadian pondweed, and you've got it's so much worse because mono it cuts through it.
Are you fishing with heavy mono then as well?
I had to because you weren't allowed to use braid. I would have preferred braid for the abrasion resistance, but it was banned. Yeah. So in the summer. I was using £20. Yeah, like the heaviest mono I think I'd ever used. Yeah, but you could still. I mean, they were coming in closer.
What range?
In the summer, I was getting bites out the margin, but the spring, autumn, and winter, they were coming at range, and I was generally using £15.
Right.
And I've to check.
13-foot rods?
No. I used. I've got a few rods, but I've got like IS's 3.5s. But I like Daiwa, and I've used Infinities for ages now. I know it's 3.25s. Not, you probably they should have been a bit more pokey, but you get a rod you like, I could still hit the lead.
Right.
And even though the middle was 160, not all the spots where you're getting the bites were out there, clearly.
Sure.
And also, if you start fishing at your maximum range in the winter, then great, good luck if you're trying to get it back out there when the weather comes in. Just not happening, is it?
No.
Whereas if you fish within your boundaries, you've got the chance of getting it back out there and starting to get some. And it's it's the first really time I think I've ever done in all the carp fishing I've done that kind of like what you guys would maybe call tramlining. Fishing, finding one spot, good head of big fish in the lake, and sometimes you would get multiple bites even in the cold weather.
Nice.
No, it's good fun.
What else have we got there? I see a bit of plastic on there. Is that the fabled Gigantica rig that you were using?
That is the fabled.
The one.
That one there.
Yeah.
So actually, that's sitting exactly how it sits on the lake bed. Really,
Yeah, it looks nice,
very short hair, which is going against what you were talking about.
Yeah, it's different, isn't it?
But at the end of the session, this was Gigantica in January this year, just gone, or the year we're in now. And I started off using that same setup. So you got stiff 25-pound boom, crimped at either end, little tiny loop there, and then a loop to loop. That's one of the new prototype hooks called a claw. Very, very closed up eye, as you can see, closing the gape up, I suppose, as you would say.
Yeah.
Would you prefer to use a hook, a bigger hook, with that closed in eye like that though?
Yes, I mean, there's still the gape of the hook is for me between the point of the hook and the inside of the eye, not the inside of the point to the shank, which is what a traditional gape is measured as.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're purchasing a size 4 hook from a hook manufacturer, a size 4 is determined by the inside of the point to the inside of the shank, which it still is if you're buying hooks. But to me, in carp fishing terms, because the line's always coming out the front of the eye, the gape, so the bit available to grab the flesh, is the very tip of the point to the inside of the eye. It's
reduced, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, no, not on that. It's not. If you measured that distance there to there, it's wider than there to there. So if you took that as a gape, that's probably a size 2 hook for a gape because it's a longer shank. But what I wanted was a hook basically that looked exactly like my rig with a wide gape and a bit of shrink tube on the bottom of it. So I recreated the shrink tube but in metal And I actually, when I first started using these, was on a spinner rig, and I opened the hook up a little bit. So rather than it being so curved over, I straightened the shank out, so it was more bent hook-esque, I suppose. You know, like those original long shank nailer type. It's a little bit more like that, because I thought it was the hook went over too much. And I thought it was going to cure hook pulls completely on the spinner, and it didn't. I lost a couple of fish on it. Nailed some fish as well, and I shelved it really, didn't use it. And then I went back to it when me and Darryl were fishing in France. You know, we went to the last thinking tackle that's come out, that lake where they didn't want us there, and we were only day fishing. And,
the public
you
one,
know, and basically, because the first fish I hooked, I lost on a size 2 curve. And these were the only hooks I had in a thicker wire gauge for the same size. So these are an X wire gauge, equivalent to a wire gauge X. So I used these on a spinner rig, as you saw there. I used pretty much exactly that with a size 2 and a 16mm or 15mm pop-up, and just every single one was like, and these battles just unbelievable. And then I went back to the same hook last year at Gigantica with a hybrid stiff combi, again like quick change, but with a very last bit peeled back, your classic sort of rig ring, slightly bigger separation between the two because it was a bigger bait. And basically on that spinner rig with a slightly longer hook link and a wafter, I'd lost a couple of fish, and I just wanted to go over to something I knew they'd be nailed on. So I went over like I said, I think braided hook links create the best hook holds, most secure hook holds, and this effectively, the bit that's doing the business is braid, right by the you know. So I've got the anti-tangle properties because I'm fishing out of 28 wraps. I've got the anti-tangle properties, but at the same time I've got a hook with a beaked point. It's barbless. I've crimped the barb down because that's the rule on Gigantica. And contrary to what people think, I'd fish to exactly the same rules as everybody else. And yeah, I didn't lose anything else, and landed 2 60-pounders that week. I got overshadowed by Mr. Steve French, my mate, who had an 87-pounder. So no one even, and my mate Rusty had a 79-pounder. So my brace of 60s was like, whatever. Do you know what I mean? But so that sort of got me to thinking about the hook as a combi. And then when I went back in January, I fished it like that, as a much quicker change combi, because the boom remains the whole time, and all you do is change the little loop sections. I've got loads of little loops tied up, and I just cut that off, loop to loop another one on, and that was with sharpened hooks. I was sharpening these barbless, making them barbless and sharpening them, and I think I lost just over 10%. I had 71 bites in the week, and I landed 64 fish in January on plastic.
Fishing over corn, Dan, do you
Fishing
make
over corn, yeah.
Do you make sure that's pretty well anchored down as well, that plastic?
This is too great. I don't want it sitting up like that. I don't want it waving around. I don't want it critically balanced. I want the hook laying flat, so the bait is above the hook, which I think obscures it. But when at the end of the week, this is what I was going to come on to. At the end of the week, I'm there with Kev Wyatt, and we're doing GoPro shots. So you're throwing bait in, spomming it in generally, letting the spom so you get the same spread right in the edge. I'm in waders, and then I'm dropping the rig. He's got a GoPro there, and I'm dropping the rig so it looks like the rig coming to rest amongst the bait. So when I cast out, when you watch the film, when I cast out and you film the lead at the bottom, it'll cut to that shot of it, boom, and it's not out there. Everyone knows it's not out there. You can't have divers. It's in the edge, but to show how it presents and what the whole thing looks like on the bottom, that's what we do. And when you stand back and look at it, when you've spotted just corn, they just look like two bigger, juicier bits of corn. They're so close to the lake bed that they stand out because they're bigger and they're slightly brighter orange, only ever so slightly. And when them fish come in, 7 times it went in my hand in January. I've not even sunk the line,
What?
and I've got one on.
Are you
know?
Are you like flavouring that corn, Dan? Or is
That's the IB corn, and I put the isotonic goo on it because it's a really potent, zingy one that seems to penetrate.
That will just that. But so goo wouldn't. Would the goo penetrate the corn like before?
I
or is
think
it just-
we're certainly. If you wind it in after 12 hours, you can smell isotonic on it.
Right.
So it must do in some way, mustn't it? It must do. I mean, I was catching them on that. I had some soak it in corn twist. I was catching on that. I think it's the fact that it looked exactly the same as what I was feeding, but a bit juicier. That's why I think, you imagine it coming to rest, they're in there feeding, there's 750 fish in Gigantica. In the winter time, most of them are out in the middle, so you're fishing for this massive pack of big fish and fast growing fish as well because of the stockies. And I think I put 30, I wasn't night fishing either, that's the other thing. I had all them bites, I only did 2 nights out of 7, right? And I was getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, still pitch black, and putting 20 spoms of corn out. And then by the time I'd finished doing that, it'd just be getting light, and I'd wang these rigs out and not even look at the rig in the air. I thought that was going to tangle like that with no bag on it, and a light hook bait and a soft bit by there. I thought it'd be tangled. And basically I put it out on one rod because I was losing so many leads. I was using helicopter rigs. One of our dark matter leaders converted with a Heli-safe on it, 4.5 ounce lead, and dumping the lead. But I was getting so many bites, I was running out of 4.5s, and I'm only like 2 days in, right? So I'm thinking I've got to have something, there's none up in the clubhouse, there's a little shop up there, but there's no 4.5 ounce tournaments. And we're in the middle of Mastercast, you know what I mean? So I thought, right, what can I do? So I put that on one rod thinking it's going to tangle, but I'm going to try it and just see what happens. You can't put a stick on, can't put a foam on. I've 15-pound line straight through, 28 wraps, 12-foot rod. It's as far as I can get accurately, do you know what I mean? So I put it out. 10 minutes later, it was gone. And playing it, talking to Kev, saying, "Oh, well, it weren't tangled, Kev, was it?" Then put it out again. It's gone again. So I put all the rods on it, and then they're all going. And it's a running rig. So basically, any movement is off. So I've squeezed the eye that goes inside the leg clip, so it's oval. So it's instantly. There doesn't any like that from the fish. It's now running. Really tight lines, really tight lines. Because on Gigantica, I think, because they're adept at getting rid of the rig, that they come in and eat the bait, whether it's tight, slack, whatever, they know they can get away with it. So they just come in and clean you out. And loads of people, myself included, middle of the night, did-it, and that's it. And you've been done. Like 2 bleeps, you've been done. And the number of people on like the hybrid leg clips like you use, or the leg clips with the pin in, the Nashi ones or whatever, or a helicopter rig with a Heli-safe on it and semi-slack line, wind in the morning, no lead on. They ain't even had a bleep. And the fish have shaken, because you're fishing a long way out and it's deep water. They've shaken the lead off and got off, and your bobbin ain't moved. You're not had a bleep. So, and that happened to me several times, and I thought, sod it, I'm just going to crank them up. Really, the bobbin's right at the top, play a tune on the line, and fish a running rig like that, and it just absolutely annihilated them. But I would get up 6 in the morning, put 20 spoms out, put the 3 rods out. I'd just about see the splash in the sort of half light, right? Yeah, they're all on the money like that. By the time they bought breakfast around 9 o'clock, I'd 5. I'd 3 in nets, 2 in slings like that, and I'm like, well, we've got to stop and process all these fish for camera, and then you'd lose 2 or 3 hours because the sun's moving all the time, and you do one shot and then the sun's moved over and it's in shadow and you have to look for another bit, and all this time the rods are just flapping in the breeze, and I'm like, I want to get back out there again. This is not going to happen again like this, but still, with all that time out the water,
Was there something that triggered it, Dan? They'd never seen corn before or something like that in that quantity?
They hadn't seen pure corn, I don't think. And basically how it came about was the tank I've got in my back garden, I've wanted a pond forever. And because my back garden drops about 30 foot between the back door and the bottom of the garden, it's on 3 levels. Right. And to have a pond was going to cost 160 grand just for the pilings.
Jesus.
Not for the pond, just the pilings. I went, mate, I'll buy another lake. It's fine, So the compromise was to have this tank. So we got some fish from an embryo lake where we were growing them on, a stock pond. And we wanted to catch pounders, half-pound pounders, because we'd put a load of little tiny ones in, but we couldn't catch any of them. And the Guru boys caught them all. The smallest one I think was £2, the biggest one was £6. So I've been feeding them the whole time, watching them. Every morning I get up and I watch Carp feed at that angle, not above them. I'm seeing them at that angle. And every night when I get home from work, if it's still light, I watch Carp feed again. It's the bollocks. I love it. But I'm growing them on to put them in an embryo lake. So they've come out of an embryo stock pond, growing them for 2 years. This November they're going to get put into an embryo lake, and then I'm going to get 10 more and do the same thing with them, yeah. But so I'm feeding them all different things. I've not put any rigs in or anything yet, which I should have done. But you know them October, November days when it doesn't seem to get light all day, and it's like horrible, misty, cold, dank, like you don't want to go out of the house, them sort of days, right? I put crumb boilie, pellet, whatever in them days. All they do is push it to the side of the tank and it just sits. You know, 4 metre long tank, it just sits alongside the tank, right? It doesn't matter what the weather's like. If I put a tin of corn in there, 10 minutes is all gone. Right the way through the winter, them coldest days, it's all gone within 10 minutes. And that's what convinced me to just go to Gigantica and just fish corn.
And you don't, because we've always sort of known, like baits like, you know, maggots, worm, corn, all superb. But normally it's the nuisance fish in a lake that restricts you. So if you've not got that concern.
So we had massive shoals of huge rudd. If you look back on the masterclasses we've done there's Turner and all the lads with a stick with a bit of line on catching these pound rudd, like literally one a chuck, you know, with shitty gear. Do you know what I mean? They shouldn't have got a bite on anything. And you'd see big shoals of like 200-300 rudd come up under your rod tips like that, like something out of nature's great events. Do you know what I mean? Like the sardine run. Then one winter we had a rough estimation 300 cormorants on there for days and days, if not weeks. The sky was black. They were taking the bailiffs were taking pictures of them. The sky was black with cormorants, right? And they ate everything.
Just decimated.
Everything that was a silverfish was gone. And at the end of it, they were going out in the boat and picking out roach that were 2 and 3 pound that they couldn't swallow, and all they'd done is peck their eyes out and just left them. And we've got pictures of like them all lined up, 2 and 3 pound roach, like a roach angler's like his entire life fishing, laying on the grass dead because the cormorants couldn't eat them. So that issue with because it used to be all boilie fishing because of the roach, you know, and the rudd and stuff, you know. But obviously with them all gone,
You get tactical,
you can use it.
Your biomass must be much better now.
Well, it's not, because we keep putting carp in.
Yeah, the carp are getting all that bait, aren't they?
The carp
now,
are getting all that bait, and putting those extra fish in stopped people zig fishing in the spring, which everyone used to do. So now they're getting fed right the way through the 12 months, where from probably end of March until after they spawned, a lot of people have fished 3 bits of black foam all week on every rod, you know. And putting them extra fish in basically meant you could get bites off the bottom, and everyone wants to fish on the bottom, really. They don't want to fish zigs, you know. So there's bait going in, and like now, that from when they spawn till almost Christmas, everyone starts with 10 key. You know, 10 key of good quality boilie. Like, it has to be fresh. We don't have shelf lives at all, because I'm told that the preservatives in them inhibit the amount of nutrition that actually gets into the fish. So, and also shelf life bait doesn't pop up when it goes off. So if someone puts 30 key of shit bait in a swim, it's going to rot if it doesn't get eaten. Whereas not much bait ever actually pops up. Some does, but very, very little. Most of that 10 key a day by every angler. You know, they're getting 300 to 400 key a week in the summer. That's why they're growing massive. And what's happened is all the stockies are growing like stink, but all the big uns are growing like stink as well. So the common's now 90 pound. You know, I think there's 17 over 70 now. But when we first started putting the stockies in, there were 7 70s, which was still something to be proud of. Now there's 17 over 70, and there's 2.5 times the number of fish in there. And that's all food supply, because we've got a deep lake. The water quality is brilliant. The dissolved solids in the lake, so not the sediment, but the magnesium and the different elements that can affect growth, are really low. Like my mate's a fish keeper for koi. He's got a huge koi in his back garden, and he took a sample and took it home and tested it properly and said your dissolved solids is like next to nothing, which is brilliant. So we've got all the right environment for growth, great strain of fish and loads of food. You know, but in the winter, if I'd gone out there and I ended up using 50 key of corn that week, because I've got that many bites, and I wasn't putting out spoms after each bite because I didn't have time to do it. I'd get one in and then one of the others would go, and then suddenly you got 4 and you still haven't put any more bait in, you know. And then I'd maybe put 10 more spoms out middle of the day, put the rods back out again, and sort of tea time was a really good time. And then before I went to bed, I'd put 20 more spoms of corn in, and then in the morning I'd just start afresh and do it again. And that's how I got through that amount of bait, you know. But that all came from seeing my fish eating corn in the tank. You know?
Fine line sometimes, isn't it?
It's always a fine line, mate.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted
Again,
to get you two in
that
to see what you did, to understand how you did it, because we all want to be the right side of that fine line, don't we?
Yeah.
Try to be. Right, we're happy with everything. You want to cover any more, Dan?
Well, how long have we been going?
Nearly 3 hours.
Have we? Have we? I mean, yes. I mean, there's still stuff I want to ask Luke, but I think maybe, you know,
Nick,
I want
to
to talk about the maggot fishing and how you fish over that and that sort of thing. And I wanted to talk with Aaron more about Halton and the really pressured places, but I think we're probably enough time now.
You're going to go away.
Everyone's arrived at the lake that they were driving to, having listened to this, haven't they? Do you know what I mean? That's when I listened to them.
They might have even packed up and gone home now.
But I look forward to the drive to fishing now because I get to listen to one of these on the way there. I think it's a brilliant way to absorb information and be inspired and all that sort of thing. So
yeah, you like this stuff, don't you?
I love it, mate. Absolutely love it. So.
All right, guys. Well, it's been a nice show.
Yeah, cheers, Si.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen.
Don't think you won't be asked back on again at some point either. Okay. And Dan, you can keep that.
It'd be a different presenter, obviously. But
Toby next time.
Solar 101.
You can keep the thriller rig as well, Dan.
Cheers, mate. Thanks very much.
All right, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Thank you.
The Thinking Tackle Podcast.